Evening and welcome to the South Burlington Development Review Board. My name is Dawn Philibert. I'm chair of the board, and tonight's meeting is on July 20th, 2021. We are in the midst of a pretty big thunder and lightning storm. If we run out of power, we're instructed to continue to try to get on the call for 10 minutes. And if we can't, we'll have to reschedule the meeting. I would like to welcome other members of the board tonight: Mark Baer, Alyssa Eyring, Jim Langen, Stephanie Wyman, Dan Albrecht, and Frank Kochman. And also with us in attendance are Marla Keene, the Development Review Planner, and Delilah Hall, the city's zoning administrator.
We have Jim. We have Jim.
We've lost. I don't know.
Is Dawn frozen?
Dawn appears to be frozen, yes.
Who's frozen? Oh, Dawn. Oh,
Give her a second. Very windy for a moment.
Dawn is
here.
off and Alyssa's off.
Oh, Alyssa's off too.
Alyssa just went off. It's super dark.
Oh, we lost it. We're gone too. I lost it. So there's this map of who's without power.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I just pulled up the map that I'm looking at for the benefit of those of us who are still looking at the screen, just for fun. We
Mark,
can,
are you?
we have Mark, we have Dan,
Okay.
we have Alyssa, we have Dawn, we have Jim, and what did I miss? Stephanie, we have Stephanie. So that's everybody.
And Frank? Yeah.
And Frank. And we never lost Frank.
We never lost Frank.
So if you'd like, we can get started.
How do we do this when we can't read the documents?
Oh, because she doesn't have power.
Oh, because you don't have power at all. It's not that you
Right.
can just get it on your screen.
No, I'm totally without power. Does someone else is someone else able to see, and can you
Yeah,
lead the meeting?
This is Dan Albrecht. I mean, if you're scrolling, if Delilah or Marla is scrolling, I can sort of say staff comment number 2, staff comment number 3.
Okay. All right,
So do we want to start the meeting and do the normal intro, which is here?
sure, okay. Let me do that, and then I'll hand it over to Dan.
So the first item
Um,
is directions on emergency evacuation procedures. We have no members of the public in person, so we can skip that
Okay.
item.
Okay, and the second item, I do have my iPad, but I'm not connected to the, so I can read my notes. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items? Okay, before we do reminders, are there any announcements?
We have moved into 180 Market Street. We are still settling in, and the City Hall will be having an open house. City Hall and Library will be having an open house on Friday from 4:30 until 8. The building will be open from 4:30 until 7. So if you want to come in and see what you voted to build, you are most welcome.
And there'll be food trucks.
Yes. And a dedication ceremony at 4:30.
Yes.
Good. So that means that our next DRB meeting, which is on August 3rd, will be in person at City Hall, the new City Hall. And we will also have ways for people to join the meeting virtually. Correct, Marla?
Yes. Going forward, that will always be available.
Okay, good. So let's proceed with the meeting. Thank you all in attendance or who are listening in on the phone and watching online if you have that ability. Anyone who wishes to participate in the hearing should sign in on the virtual sign-in sheet in the chat box, and this is important in order to be considered a participant should you want to obtain party status in order to appeal a decision made by the board. Please indicate that you have a comment by saying your name or write in the chat box that you would like to ask a question after the applicant has presented and we've reviewed the staff comments. People on the phone who would like to sign in to be considered a participant can send an email to Marla Keen at mkeene@sburl.com and provide your contact information. You can also submit comments in writing. We ask that you please refrain from engaging in a conversation in the chat box. It's very disruptive and it is not considered part of the public record. And if we do get back online, please mute your phone and turn your camera off unless you're talking or commenting. Okay, are there any comments and questions from the public that are not related to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, let's start reviewing the two projects we'll be reviewing tonight. And I'm going to turn this over to Dan Albrecht because at least he can read the materials. So go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Delilah, can you bring up the, so this is item number 5, the Burlington Airport, International Airport. They requested continuance to August 3rd. So we're now on item 6, continued preliminary plan application.
Dan, can I just interject real quick? As a board, we need to do a formal motion to continue it and approve it, and then we can move on to item 6. I'll make a motion that we continue site plan application SB 2126 of Burlington International Airport to August 3rd.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining. I'm recused.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dan.
Okay, so this is continued preliminary plat application SD-20-40 of O'Brien Eastview LLC to create a plan unit development. 6 existing parcels currently developed with 3 single-family homes and a barn and totaling 102.6 acres. Development is to consist of 135 homes and single-family, duplex, and three-family dwellings on 9 lots totaling 21.8 acres, 19 commercial development lots totaling 44.0 acres, 1 existing single-family home, 25.1 acres of undeveloped open space, 500 Old Farm Road. Staff comments?
So who is here to represent the applicant?
Evan Langfeld from O'Brien Brothers, and just to repeat, like Don, I'm operating in the dark here by candlelight, and I think I have enough battery power to make it through the meeting, but if I go silent, I'll try and call in from another line.
Thanks, Evan.
Anyone else with you?
It's a good question. I think we're trying to figure it out. Andrew Gill with the O'Brien Brothers. I think we've got some other folks here too, rolling the dice. Who's got power?
Scott Homestead from Clemson Lansing Consulting Engineer, civil engineer for the applicant.
Roger Dickinson, Lamoureux Dickinson.
Corey Mack with the WCG.
Great.
Is that everyone you're expecting, Andrew?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like we got lucky.
I am keeping an eye on the outage map. They do seem to be a little behind in updating this back on, but it has gotten a little bit worse close to your neighborhood. So I'm watching those that I know are interested persons, and if we start losing neighbors or members of your applicant team, I'll just make sure I call that out because I want to make sure that this public meeting does in fact act as a public meeting. Looks like we lost some more people, some more power outages in West Twin Oaks Terrace, which is near you guys. So you want to get started on the staff comments? Dan?
There.
Yeah.
I just want to say I'm recused from the meeting, so I'm gonna walk away.
All right, Stephanie is recused.
The for the staff comments, but maybe while we have Roger and before we lose power, I don't know if it would make sense to jump to the end to the comment on the roundabout. I think there's only 2 topics in the packet.
Yeah. Yep.
It just might make sense for Roger to be available here and to go over that quickly, if that's all right with the board.
I don't have a problem with that.
Just a moment. If we're going to do the Von Turkovich item, I need to recuse myself. This is Frank.
Oh, no, we're just doing the O'Brien. There's 2 topics in the O'Brien one, and we're going to do the second topic of the O'Brien one first.
Okay. You're going to stick with O'Brien for now. Hmm?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's on the last page of the packet. So page 6.
Dan, do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, I got my paper version here. So on the last page of the staff comment, the traffic study is summarized. Staff recommends that the board review the 1-page memo from BFJ to inform their discussion of whether to require the applicant to modify their design to include roundabouts in lieu of the signalized intersections of Kimball Ave and Old Farm Road and Kimball Avenue and I-C Road. It's at the bottom of page 6, Delana.
I understand, Dan, you also made another
Okay.
request that I'm trying to fulfill, so
Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry.
I don't know, page 6.
Does the applicant have any, want to add a little comment about this on the roundabout and maybe summarize?
Sure.
Roundabout.
Roger, do you want to speak to what the memo had said? I think there was a question in there for you as well, and then we had provided the information that was requested today.
Certainly. The memo requested from George Jacobart requested verification of what the addition of the highway capacity manual that was used to in the roundabout analyses, and he also asked for copies of the printouts of the roundabout analyses, and I believe those were provided to the board in an email from me to Andrew, and then I think Andrew submitted it to the board. So that, yeah, we used the latest edition of the highway capacity manual, which was published in 2016. That's called the 6th edition. And printouts, I believe, speak for themselves. They showed that the levels of service varied from morning to afternoon, but with the afternoon being generally worse, with I believe both locations experiencing level of service F. Traffic congestion conditions. So I believe those were the 2 major questions that George had in his memo to the city.
I have a couple of questions. Is it appropriate now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm looking at the memo from the city's consultant, Georges Jacquemart. Is that correct? How you pronounce his name?
Yep, he's Belgian.
Has he been provided with the material that the developer provided today, and has he commented?
No, we didn't get that until midday today. So his questions, he said in his memo, while I don't disagree with the overall conclusion, I do have the following questions. And those are the questions that Roger just answered.
Well, but I read that as meaning, based on, if I take everything in front of me at face value, I don't disagree with it. But until he sees the material he asked for, I consider his agreement not particularly firm. Anybody else have that concern? All right, well, that was rhetorical. I have a couple more questions. I would like to understand why I heard the explanation that a two-lane roundabout was more complex. On the other hand, it would seem to resolve the level of service question, would it not?
Generally, two-lane roundabouts are considerably less safe.
Well, that wasn't the question. The question was whether they would probably resolve the level of service question.
We don't know that. That has not been analyzed.
Okay, obviously it would be more expensive to build, correct? It would take more land, also correct?
That is correct, yes.
All right, but presumably it would make the level of service issue go away. Fair?
Possibly.
I guess I'd like to know more about that. I guess I'd like to hear from the city consultant. Does staff have any, has staff had what is staff's view on this issue?
Being the wrong sort of engineer, but having some experience in this, I think that the city is not particularly interested in a large two-lane roundabout in this location. It doesn't seem like the right application for the size of the roadway, size being, a industrial collector road as opposed to an arterial.
All right, I have another question. What is the distance? Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, I made it go away. I'm getting better at that. Okay. What is the distance from the intersection of Kennedy and Kimball to the intersection of Kimball and the roadway in, which I guess is the extension of Old Farm Road? I'm not quite sure how to read that, but I think you know what I mean. Here's what I'm getting at. A signalized intersection has, depending how busy it gets, has a real opportunity for backup that a well-designed roundabout would avoid. And we have a number of examples of, certainly in Burlington, lights that takes 2 or 3 cycles to get through. And it's not good planning, it's not good traffic movement. Are we at risk of that, given what looks like, I'm not certain what the distance is, the proximity of what I'm calling, the Kimball Avenue end of Old Farm Road to Kennedy Drive? Excuse me.
So if I were to restate that
You don't mean
in
Kennedy,
sort of,
you know what I mean, okay.
if I were to rephrase that in traffic engineer terms, it would be, what's the queue length anticipated? And will it extend past the relocated Old Farm Road intersection? Is that a fair way to phrase your question, Frank?
Yes, in other words, does it put you, let me take a look at the map.
For
Scott, do you
reference,
know off the top of your head what that distance is between the new Old
I
Farm
do.
Road intersection?
I do, it's about 600 feet.
Yeah, I just scaled 575, so.
Yeah, I went center line to center line at 600.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that seems like it ought to be adequate in most circumstances, right? But,
Could I make a public comment? I know it's inappropriate at this time, but I am the owner of 30 Kimball. It's John Wilking.
Dan, Dawn, that's up to you.
John, can you? Go ahead. Go ahead, Jan.
Yeah, I'd like to stay with protocol for now and let's make sure we understand this roundabout issue.
Well, that's why I'm interrupting.
And I'd like
Totally
to say,
totally up to you.
all due respect, John, I'd rather just keep to the process so we understand this roundabout issue a little more generally. And I would just,
Maybe I could suggest we take questions on the roundabout from the public before we close the roundabout topic, and then we talk about the other topic as its own thing.
That makes perfect sense. And John, I look forward to hearing your question, but I actually have a question at this point in time. Whose idea was the roundabout? I'm a little confused at this point. Did the applicant want a roundabout? Did we ask the applicant to consider and analyze a roundabout? Where did this idea of the roundabout come from? What am I missing?
Who are you asking, Dawn?
I guess I'm asking you and other board members and maybe even Andrew and Evan. I just need some insight in, because it doesn't sound like they support it. And so I'm assuming they did not propose it. So maybe this is for you, Marla. Where did this all come from?
So it was suggested in the traffic technical review that the board should consider whether to ask the applicant to evaluate a roundabout.
Okay.
And then 2 meetings ago, the board said, yes, we would like you to consider a roundabout. And
Okay.
so consider it, they did.
So I'm sorry I wasn't crystal clear about that memory, but thanks. Okay.
Roger, to the point that Frank was getting at with his questions, the intersections that we've proposed with signals operate better than a level of service F. We're at like a level of service B, is that right? And given that level of service, is there any queuing issues anticipated at those two intersections? Given your traffic study that looked at that?
Yes, that is correct. The revised traffic study indicated that the traffic signal control would provide better level of service, lower delays. Queuing will be adequate. I believe there might still be a small issue with the peak queue during the peak hour between Kennedy and the new Old Farm Road heading in the eastbound direction. But otherwise, the queuing was very good. So.
I guess, well, I won't beat it to death. I'd like to understand, because I'm a proponent of, I think generally roundabouts, if they're appropriate and well-designed, work better than traffic signals, particularly in heavy traffic areas. I'm not particularly deterred by the idea of a 2-lane roundabout. I don't find them especially dangerous when I'm traveling. And Marla, with respect, you're explanation provided no detail at all. I understand it'd be brutally expensive. On the other hand, my view of expense on a project of this size isn't particularly sympathetic on the cost saving side. I mean, can you add any more? Are you willing to, or does anybody else care about this issue? Does anybody, I mean, the board asked to have the roundabout evaluated, to have the 2-lane roundabout dismissed out of hand, which would obviously improve the level of service. Seems to me a little summary without a little more detail. That's all.
I believe that Roger spoke to the third-party consultant who had originally suggested the roundabout, and that they also agreed that a 2-lane roundabout was not appropriate in this location. Roger, maybe you want to talk to that a little bit.
Yes, in my conversations with George Jacomar, he specifically indicated that he would only consider a 1-lane roundabout on Kimball Avenue. And his opinion was that while roundabouts, are safer and particularly for pedestrians, 2-lane roundabouts are not as safe as a 1-lane roundabout. And then we have the questions of scale, obviously. So he was definitely pointing us in the direction of a 1-lane roundabout, to only consider that.
All right, I'll let it go. Personally, I'm not particularly persuaded. I'd like to speak to our consultant and not just rely on that, because my bias is strongly in favor of the roundabout, but I'm not going to, I think we got to move on. I mean, that's all we're going to get out of this without.
Do other board members have feelings about it?
Yeah,
This is Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
I just have one question for Mr. Dickinson. Are there other projects that you've analyzed where you found that roundabouts are a good solution in the past in the area, or have you found that they're not really, when you've analyzed them, not really the answer?
Well, oh gosh, about 12, 15 years ago now, we designed the Montpelier roundabout at Route 2 and 302, and in that case, the city specifically requested a 1-lane roundabout with provisions to expand it in the future if needed to a 2-lane. But they wanted to stick with a 1-lane, which we did. That has worked very well. The other projects that we've have done roundabouts on have been primarily residential streets in residential developments, where mini roundabouts actually do form a nice gateway in some cases, and it kind of calms traffic in other situations as well, slows people down. So yes, generally the sense in what we've experienced in the greater Burlington area is that roundabouts on major collector streets such as Kimball Avenue are particularly in areas that have already been developed, they're just not feasible due to the size and cost limitations that they create.
Well, I'm willing to spend Evan's money,
I heard that, Frank.
And, if you're talking about other examples, I mean, I don't know, those of you who, I'm sure everybody at some point either has or will use the Waterbury roundabout, which I think is terrific. It's a fabulous, it's a terrific improvement over what that intersection used to be like.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, I don't think we should just let this go so easily.
We had reviewed the Waterbury roundabout in the study Roger provided, and that was the size and type of roundabout that was analyzed and found to be dysfunctional due to the level of service that was failing.
Yeah,
So,
which brings us back to 2 lanes. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm just, I'm I'm trying to drum up board support for not letting this issue go and asking them to come back and asking maybe our consultant to come back and not just letting it slide tonight. And if there's not a consensus or at least a majority in that direction, I promise to stop now.
Well, this is Dawn. I want to make sure that we do the right thing. And I'm not sure I have a sense of what that is right now. And so I don't want the applicant to incur greater expense than is necessary, but I also want to make sure this is a big development. And I want to make sure that we have at that intersection the right infrastructure to handle the traffic. So I don't disagree with you, Frank. Maybe we do need more analysis and information.
Don, if I can just interject, this is Evan again. I mean, I do think that, we don't have any sort of knee-jerk reaction to roundabouts, but I do think that there's other considerations, and it's not just level of service and it's not just queue in this location. You have a grade issue coming from a steep hillside that, we have planned development on, which would change the character of the entryway into that development. You also have existing development on the streetscape beyond what we're planning that's actually existing there. And the amount of land required to implement a roundabout, as I think we've demonstrated, is problematic in this location. And I think maybe that second point might be what John Wilking was, waiting to speak about.
Sure.
Because that would require acquisition of land outside of the city's right of way for a single lane roundabout. And a 2-lane roundabout would, Roger, what would the size of a 2-lane roundabout be? We had shown, I think, 115 foot inscribed diameter. What would a 2-lane roundabout diameter be?
You're muted.
I think you're looking at about at least 130 feet diameter.
Extending, in fact, 20 feet further outside of the right of way.
Yeah, Don, this is Dan. I mean, the conclusions on the bottom of page 10 are pretty clear, and we're at preliminary here. So I understand we obviously want to be mindful of traffic issues, but I'm not seeing sort of like a slight judgment call here. The analysis is by Lamoureux and Dickinson is pretty declaratory. So I'd like to move on, and then see Mr. Wilking has a comment though before we after the board members are done.
And Dan, when you say very self-explanatory, you mean in terms of supporting a signalized intersection?
Yeah. Okay. There's not much equivocation, in other words.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I do want to hear what John has to say.
I do just want to chime in and add that I feel like a signalized intersection is a better choice than a roundabout in this case. Not saying a roundabout isn't a good idea. It works great in Waterbury, but I think this is a very different circumstance. And I don't see it necessarily being the solution, especially based on the traffic study we were provided with.
I concur with Alyssa's assumption or interpretation. I think that they all have their place. And I'm not in opposing Frank's standpoint of wanting to look at it further, but I just think that given the look of it and given the proximity and the configuration, a roundabout would be more problematic than the signalized intersection for these two instances.
So I'm wondering if we can hear from John now, Mr. Wilking? Is that appropriate, Dan? You're in charge.
Sure, yeah, you're still on the line. I didn't want to take your responsibility.
No.
Go ahead, John.
Take the power and run with it, Dan.
Okay, if only say the word. Go ahead, Mr. Wilking. You're muted.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Don and Dan. I own 30 Kimball, which is the entrance way across the street from Evan's project here. And as you can tell, the offset is significant if if this is a standard circular single-laned roundabout. It clearly can't be. Our easement allows only so much space, and to exceed it will stop entry capability to both the corner property, the old Merchants Bank property, 20 Kimball, 30 Kimball, and 40 Kimball. So it's simply infeasible to do the offset roundabout. To do the inset roundabout that pushes further onto Evans' property, I think is unfortunate. I think it's a mistake because it's going to confuse people. And to do a 2-lane is, I think, impossible. So I'm simply pointing out that A, we will not sell any land. B, we will fight with every force we have to make sure it doesn't happen. And I'm sure we will have additional folks involved in that from the corner and 20 Kimball. And we just feel strongly that this should be signalized. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Well, somewhere between persuasion and fear, I'm going to withdraw my objection.
I just have one question for the applicants as a former, regional planning commission used to be in 30 Kimball. And on an icy day, climbing out of a 30 Kimball driveway was always a hassle and putting your life in your hands. Will the road align with the driveway to 30 Kimball? Would the signal serve those people exiting 30 Kimball?
Yeah, it's directly opposite the curb cut to 30 Kimball, and originally it was offset, but now it's directly aligned with it.
That's awesome. That'll help. Okay. Any more on the issue of the roundabout and the signalized intersection? We get back to the start of the staff comments.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you, Roger. Thanks, John, for weighing in. I think that the next agenda item is, and I think the only remaining one on this hearing as it relates to our project, is the issue of the community rec path or pedestrian accessibility on the south side of Old Farm Road as it relates to our project. And I think, just to kind of clarify things again, the community rec path that is being discussed in the packet is not being driven by the applicant. Several meetings ago, 4 or 5 meetings ago, probably at this point, Board Member Bear had asked the question or pointed out, I think a deficiency, rightfully so, a deficiency in our plan, which is that we did not have a pedestrian or bicycle connection to the Tilly Drive area, and specifically to the new Red Barn Market over there. So how do folks living in our development access the Tilly Drive and that new market and, potentially other amenities that could be over there or employment opportunities? And so we went back to the drawing board and we have proposed and are still including in our application a community rec path, a 10-foot rec path, asphalt paved path that would connect from our development on the eastern slope of Old Farm Road. It would be entirely on our property until it crosses over onto the Pizzagalli property. And we have been given a verbal agreement by Bob Bouchard at Pizzagalli that they would support that we would continue that rec path over to the pedestrian facilities over there. What is being discussed in the packet, and there was a site walk, which unfortunately I wasn't able to attend, but I know Andrew was there, was to demonstrate the existing conditions on the south end of Old Farm Road, particularly with the existing development pattern there and the tight relationship to homes, parking facilities, garages, and existing mature landscaping on both sides of the road, the east and west sides of the road, and the challenges associated with putting a pedestrian or bicycle facility along there that would connect to Tilly Drive and would get essentially to the exact same location it may be a more direct line, which is pointed out in staff commentary. But I still think that, what we are providing is, A, gets us to the same location, but just as importantly, it does so in a manner that I think doesn't have any negative or adverse effects on the existing neighborhood, which, I'm sure that some of our neighbors would probably prefer that the development at Old Farm Road didn't occur and that it had all stayed, the way it always had been. But they've been, I think, fairly supportive of what we've done. We've tried to be good neighbors through the first phase, and we've tried to be good neighbors during this permitting phase and the second phase of it. And, we would prefer to be sympathetic to their concerns, and I think those concerns are valid. And so we have proposed, again, our alternative, and we've also engaged a different transportation engineer, Corey Mack, who is on the line right now, who is also taking a look both at what we proposed, but also the Tilly Drive transportation study, which originally was what called out the need for this improvement in that location. So I don't know, unless the board objects, I think I would prefer to just turn it over to Corey, assuming he's still on the line. I can't see, and just have him give a quick summary. We did submit a letter today, both from O'Brien Brothers as well as a supplemental letter that Corey had written. It did come in late, so it was not included in the board packet, but we would be happy to either read it this evening or submit it as a supplemental addition to our packet.
So it's in and the board can consider it. You don't have to read it if the board wishes, and I would really like the board to be driving the conversation here, but if the board wants, they may want you to summarize it, but the exact memo can be given to the board and will be given to the board before they deliberate. So just be assured that they will have that paper available to them.
Okay, thank you.
Dawn?
So if the board wants to decide if they want to discuss some of the points in the staff memo, or if they want to start with the applicant's testimony, Dawn, how would you like to proceed here?
Again, I don't have the documents in front of me, but I know it's a single issue. Pardon me?
I'm going to hop in. I've got a paper printout in front of me, so it's pretty easy for me to.
Oh, okay, Dan, take it away.
Yeah, I think to some extent, since the information by Mr. Mack is sort of new information, I think it'd be good to kind of go through staff comments. I kind of felt the staff comments were very helpful for me that was not aware of the history as much for this project. So I found them very useful. And I don't think we need a point-by-point recap, except to say that, and I can do some of that here just to move things along to get to the kernel of the staff comment, if that's okay with the board. Is that all right?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay. So because I had asked about during the site walk about policy and plans. So staff comments, and I guess if Delilah, you can bring them up on the screen for the benefit of the public or anything. So the policy document supportive of the multimodal strategies, number 1 from November 2020, the Vermont 116/Kimball Ave/Tilly Drive Area Land Use and Transportation Plan, November 2020. Recommends a shared use path along the entire length of Old Farm Road. Bottom of page 2. Responses to questions to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee from the DRB. So the committee, Bike and Ped Committee, provided a thorough response in their February 17th packet with the following relevant excerpt. Bottom of page 2 on the staff, at minimum should be a sidewalk on the west side of Old Farm Road, et cetera, as it reads there. Number 3, on the top of page 3, the memorandum dated May 4th, 2021, from the Bike and Ped Committee. And again, looking at the bullet points, the key reasons we support this alternative over the proposed connection from O'Brien to Tilly Drive along the new industrial road are as follows. The grade along Old Farm is more gradual and conducive to walking and biking. Connection along Old Farm is more direct, both for residents as well as commuters. We think that walking in and around a residential development should be of paramount concern, and the proposed advisory lanes on this section of Old Farm fail to provide a solution for walkers. And then last bullet point, it is our understanding that Old Farm currently sees significant pedestrian traffic. Our assumption is that increased volumes of drivers and walkers from the new development will only increase what is already a significant safety concern and gap in our pedestrian infrastructure. The alternative path directly east to Tilly Drive does not sufficiently address either of these issues along this section of Old Farm Road. And then there's citations from the comprehensive plan, objectives 17, 20, and 21, the land development regulations, the gist of which there on the page 4 of the staff comments is that the staff acknowledges that this project is utilizing an existing road. This is 15.12 M. It remains relevant that were this a new project, the applicant would be required to construct a sidewalk or rec path along this collector roadway. The project is located in the Transit Overlay District. In Act 34, the Complete Streets Law, staff considers it appropriate to advocate for complete streets when reviewing private projects. And there are several more bullets there at the bottom of page 4, which I won't read. This sort of recaps where we are, some of the discussions, and all references the field visit on July 6th. At least for me as a member, one of the more salient points of number 5 on page 5, second bullet, encroachment of private landscaping into the public right-of-way is inadequate justification for changing how a public way is used, etc. And then there's the last bullet point is the position of city staff, city committees, and the independent technical review that a shared use path along the entire length of Old Farm Road is an important element of the proposed project. And the recommendations of staff, 3 possible options, and I won't read them there. Basically, some sort of bike ped facility is constructed. Second bullet point, payment in lieu of, and third, a bicycle advisory lane option by the applicant. And then again, comment the key point there in red. You can all read that there. I won't recap it, but the staff, we understand the staff acknowledges the strong public opposition, et cetera, et cetera. So I won't read that there. So that I appreciate the staff. This definitely helped me get up to speed on the small and larger issues affecting this consideration of the path. So that's kind of a summary of things. I'll open it up to the board members, if they want to discuss some of these particular points with staff.
So this is Dawn. I was on the site review on July 6th, and I found what the neighbors said to be pretty compelling, and looking at all the vegetation and the screening that it provided them. But as I thought about all of that, and I think Marla did a nice job of spelling it out in the staff report, that encroachment on a public right-of-way or public land is not justification for not doing a project that is deemed by the appropriate authorities to be the most appropriate alternative. So, we've all probably encroached on public land from our property, but and it's unfortunate. But the reality is that is public land, and I'm not sure this is the right place to put the path, but it certainly sounds like a lot of informed people think it is. So that's my comment on speaking to the neighbor's concern and so forth.
Well,
Any other board members?
I have something to say, but I've already spoken a lot, so I'd like to reserve it until, and hear what other board members have to say first.
Dan, can I weigh in, or Don, whoever?
Hey, go ahead, Mark.
Okay. I think, in attending the site visit and seeing the existing conditions, and looking at both sides of this issue, I hear the neighbors' concerns, but I think that the big picture and the sort of the history and the logistics and rationale that are laid out by staff in the comments are very compelling to say that I'm not willing to sort of just write it off. I think we need to study it further. We need to ask the applicant to come back with something. I'm not saying, I think one thing that one thing the neighbors are fearful of is the idea that we're going to take the 21 feet and just clear cut it, level it, and put a 10-foot rec path on the far end of it with a 10-foot strip of grass, between the road and the rec path. That's obviously the extreme. I think there's something in between that can be a compromise. I don't think given the existing situation that anything is going to not set the apple cart, whatever the expression might be. But I think we need to come up with something. I think that this is going to be the most direct route. We're going to increase pedestrian traffic. We're going to increase vehicular traffic. And if we don't provide something, people are still going to use the road for walking, and it's going to only increase the number of people, and the amount of traffic is going to increase. So from a big picture standpoint, we have to come up with something. And I think that the direct connection between the development and Heinsberg Road, the mill, the deli area is what's needed. So I think, we can do something like, what they did in front of Tech Park on South Brownell or something, where it sort of meanders, it sort of, like it goes up and down. It's got some landscaping, not that we have that much room, but I think some sort of hybrid or some sort of thing like that can be a little more sensitive, but still achieve, the goal of providing additional safety and taking pedestrians off of the vehicular way.
Thanks, Mark. Alyssa, do you have any comments?
I felt pretty torn about this. I don't know if it's at all feasible, but I'm even wondering if there's a way to sort of do the bike path that the developer is proposing in the place they propose and just do a 5-foot sidewalk along Old Farm Road. So we really minimize how much we're interrupting that space. I think the biggest issue is that pedestrians clearly are using it. And no matter what happens, they're going to continue to use it. And it's not a safe place for people to be walking. But do we have to put in a bike path there? Maybe the bike path going in an alternate place is a better alternative. And we sort of try to minimize what happens in terms of interrupting all of the neighbors' front yards as much as we can.
Jim Langen?
Very similar thoughts. I have very similar thoughts to Alyssa on this. That's my concern is pedestrians here, as opposed to sort of the bike circulation flow. I think can be given sort of alternatives. Can still be there still will be alternatives for safe bike passage, but I have pedestrian concerns, and perhaps a sidewalk may make more sense to me. But I'm definitely open to hearing more from the applicant and from other members of the community.
Frank?
Well, I am, for once, completely preempted by Alyssa, who said exactly what I intended to say. And I support what she said. Unlike Jim, I'm not as open to hearing argument the other way. I support Alyssa's view 100%.
Yeah, I think Alyssa
adding only that having looked at the site, and I guess Mark and others would know more about this than I, you don't have to run a straight shot. In other words, I will add this. I'm sensitive to the idea that private landscaping can't preempt the public way. That's true, but that's not really the issue here because we have the right to take, quote, our right of way for public purposes. Doesn't mean we oughta, to the full extent that we can. In this instance, however, I agree with Alyssa, up to the 5-foot limit. And I think some effort ought to be made not to do, just the shortest and quickest, but maybe something a little bit windy that respects some of the landscaping that's there from a purely aesthetic standpoint. That's it. It's my comment.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, I definitely think it's, for me, what impressed upon me on the site visit is, boy, that road's pretty narrow already.
Yeah.
And certainly very dangerous for biking. I mean, for pedestrians, especially because it's on a hill like that and poor sight lines, et cetera. People probably used to speeding there because they're like, oh, there's just a couple of homes on this road. I'm going to go fast. Especially going downhill or going to the south. And I think something in between this, somewhere between 5 and 10 feet, and maybe there's some creative approaches that Complete Streets people have used that can and all. And I'd like to see that shoulder improved. I think there's going to be different types of bikers. I think the path that developers propose is a great amenity in the standpoint of like, that's the bike path that the kids go on, or people, from Tilly Drive, they'll want to take a walk after work or during the workday, or people, ideally, there's going to be people living in this development who are walking to work at the medical industrial complex at Tilly Drive. But there's got to be something for pedestrians there along there. And I think ultimately sidewalks improve the value of that neighborhood, and it's somewhat in the eye of the beholder. But I think long-term wise, as somebody who lives in an old established neighborhood with sidewalks, definitely an amenity. So that's my thoughts.
One more thing. I didn't mean at all to suggest that I saw this as an alternative, the 5-footer as an alternative to what the developer has proposed through Tilly Drive. Again, freely spending Evans money. I think they should.
Yeah.
That the bikes should go through Tilly Drive. That's entirely logical, and that there ought to be a sidewalk on Old Farm Road.
And ideally, there's some, for me at least, that in addition to at minimum a sidewalk along that public right of way, to try to meet the various policy documents that Marla laid out. There's got to be improvements to that road as well with some adequate shoulder, because the hardcore bikers will go on the road.
Right.
The people who are real commuters and real quote unquote regular bike users, not just recreational. They're going to want to zip up and down that road. So, any more board member comments before we just go back to?
Yeah, I actually really like the suggestion that Alyssa made and others have supported. I walk a fair amount on that road, and you're always looking over your shoulder and switching to the other side. I mean, it is a real safety issue. So I think having a sidewalk makes perfect sense. And I think having the bike avenue off the development makes sense too.
Thanks. Any other board members? Okay, staff.
I would just note if someone from Kathy Frank from the Bike Ped Committee has joined the meeting, I would just want to make sure she gets the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Go ahead, Kathy. We can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, my concern, I have several concerns. One is clearly you need a way for both pedestrians and people that bike, whether they be hardcore bikers or kids who bike or older people who bike, to get from the top of the hill down to where the action is. And I'm afraid if you just put in a sidewalk that the kids will start biking down the sidewalk and coming back up the sidewalk because it's the shortest route. A recreation path does not exclude pedestrians. In fact, if you walk along our multi-use path, almost everywhere in South Burlington, you'll see as many pedestrians as you'll see bikers. So I don't think delineating between the two types is necessarily a good idea. I appreciate, and Bike Ped appreciates the problem with the limited space on that road and in the shoulders. But a bike path doesn't have to be 10 feet wide, or let's call it the recreation path, doesn't have to be 10 feet wide. It can be, or excuse me, 15, was it? I'm confused. It can be less, it can be 8, and you can still get by with having shared use on the path. And I'm afraid if you make it uncomfortable for people that are on a bicycle because they have to go further to get to where they want to go, they will, as I said, probably ride down the sidewalk.
Thanks, Kathy. Any other members of the committee or any other faculty and board members? Before we turn it over to public comment. And the applicant, Andrew, Evan, before we go to the public.
Yeah, we did just want to point out a couple things. One item that was mentioned in the staff comments, and actually I think it may have come from the Bike and Ped Committee, is about the grade located along Old Farm Road versus what the grade is along Tilly Drive, and that it would be more conducive to have folks traveling along the Old Farm Road. The grade is the exact same. There wouldn't be a preference one way or the other. And I think that the other last point that was made by the Bike and Ped Committee is that there's significant pedestrian traffic already on Old Farm Road. And while there are people that walk on Old Farm Road, it's also, important to point out the fact that there is no other alternative. If there's an alternative pedestrian route via a rec path that's going to the same location, I don't necessarily think that folks would be walking that Old Farm Road route or biking that Old Farm Road route as opposed to taking the rec path that we're proposing. But I think what I would like to do, if the board is okay with it, is just simply have Corey Mack, our transportation engineer, at least summarize some of his comments that he had put in that document, because I think they are important, more related to the process than necessarily whether it should be a rec path or a sidewalk. Is the board okay with that if he speaks quickly?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody. Again, my name is Corey Mack. I am a transportation planner and transportation engineer with WCG. I reviewed the comments. I was forwarded the packet and reviewed the comments from city staff, and just had a couple of points to bring up from the overall recommendation here. Just in general, I think that the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure along Old Farm Road is a great idea. I think that that's exactly what we should be having. I think it's consistent with a lot of the the city documents and everything. But there is a process in how we get there, and how the Eastview development is building paths on its own property is often very different than how paths are built outside of private property and along public rights of way. And that process usually follows a scoping process where we look at different alternatives. We look at if it should be a sidewalk or if it should be a a sidewalk with bike lanes, or a 10-foot wide path, a 10-foot wide path along the shoulder of the road with curbs and drainage, or if it should be a 12-foot wide path with a green strip and trees. It evaluates a variety of alternatives, and it does that by looking at who's going to be using it. It will have pedestrian counts, it will have bike counts, it'll have a lot of different information that backs this up, and then it'll also look at the existing land that's out there. So you'll have the adjacent properties, the presence of utilities or fire hydrants or ledge or anything that makes construction of these different features, these proposed features, more or less infeasible. And then very importantly, it also goes through a public process where you go and you talk to everybody that lives along the route and everybody inside the town. Usually this process is driven publicly. It is something that, the, planning commission would oversee, or some other, publicly appointed board. And that's so that it is not seen as having, the hillside or Eastview team kind of putting their thumb on the scale in a certain direction. Really, what has happened, or what it looks like here, is that we're going by this first Vermont 116 Kimball Ave Tilly Drive area land use and transportation plan document. This one from November 2020 that cites Old Farm Road as a location for a shared use path, and basically they drew lines on all the through streets, because that's great. That's what we want. We want to have bike and ped infrastructure on all these streets so that people have viable alternatives to get around. But the scale of their study is very high level. They're just looking at like what would be a great idea, and I think that everybody would agree that it's a great idea. But the next step and what their ultimate recommendation in that land use and transportation study is a scoping study to figure out what the impacts are, to figure out like what is the right infrastructure. So I think that that would be my first point, is that the process really is to go through the scoping process so that you really figure out what the impacts are, what the appropriate infrastructure is. And that is exactly what that land use transportation plan came to. That's a conclusion that they recommend. They don't say go out and build a path here. They say study what the path would look like and what's a reasonable and feasible alternative here. And then just going through some of the bike ped recommendations. I think Evan already mentioned briefly that the grade along Old Farm Road and Tilly Drive is about the same. So I don't think that really is necessarily going to keep people from taking the path. It's also a little longer, and if the elevation difference is the same, the longer path would, theoretically, if there's no dips or anything else, would be a little less. Without having a design, it's impossible to really say for certainty whether or not what the grades are. The next comment that they had was that the Old Farm Road is more direct, both for residents and for commuters. And the thing that I think that is important there is, sure, it's a more direct route for cyclists going straight from like the south side of 89 along 116 or Heinsberg Road to Kimball Ave, or to Wilson Road. But it's not really looking at other origin destination pairs that we would use. So like all the residents there, if they're wanting to walk or bike to the south side of the highway, that would be the most direct route. If they wanted to walk and bike to the open space by Whale Tails, the easiest route would be an alternative route. So it's not necessarily that it's the most direct route for everybody. It's the most direct route for one pair of origin and destinations. So I think that that's the kind of thing that a scoping study kind of highlights, like who are we trying to serve and in what sense. The next comment from the Walk and Bike Committee was that the walking and biking should be a paramount concern. I don't think that anybody's saying that that's not at all true. And I think that it's not necessarily a binary choice, that like either you have the Tilly Drive alignment or you have the Old Farm Road alignment. I think that what we should do is just slow down and breathe and figure out like what is the right alignment. The Tilly Drive alignment we can build, it is being proposed to be built all on this private property, and that can be done with no impacts. It can be, the alignment can be set to avoid any utilities, because there are no utilities out there. When we're talking about this existing road and this existing built environment, we have to start weaving this infrastructure around, and we want to make sure that we're doing it right. And I think Evan also mentioned another point where we see the next bullet. There's lots of pedestrians walking along there on Old Farm Road now. I would be curious. I don't have a survey or anything of the people that are walking and biking there, and I'm not sure what the purpose of their trips are. But I mean, that's an important thing to consider. Are they walking and biking for a recreational purpose, and are they going to the south side of 89 Or are they going to walk their dog just to stretch their legs? And if that's the case, I would say, I would venture a guess that many people would prefer to be off the road entirely. And if you're walking and biking to the market, you might prefer to be off the road where you're not adjacent to traffic. If it's a rainy day, you're not going to get splashed by puddles from cars that are driving by you. The Tilly Drive alternative alignment, it provides much of the same access. It may not be the most direct access for through bicyclists just trying to get from point A to point B, and it happens to go along Old Farm Road. Although it's only 1,000 feet longer, and people will learn that it's there. And what's 1,000 feet when you're on your bike? It's not that long to avoid driving or biking along Old Farm Road. All that being said, like I'm not trying to suggest that no infrastructure is necessary there. I'm just suggesting that we could go forward in one direction, what the developer is proposing here along Tilly Drive, and then also consider what the right direction would be on Old Farm Road. I think that ultimately there should be some sort of path or shoulder sidewalk combination. And just the conversation that was happening before this I'd say if anything corroborates what my point here about the scoping study. People have been talking about, I don't know if it's a path or where the path should be, or maybe it should be a meandering path, or if the sidewalk is more appropriate. That all kind of leads into the idea of, what we should be doing is having a community-driven, publicly managed scoping study that really identifies the right infrastructure here. And another reason why this is all important is that, if you start doing these things ad hoc, you start building this infrastructure, which is going to be around for generations. And if you don't put the intersection or the crosswalk in the right place at the first time, you're going to end up having a problem. How the path intersects with Heinsberg Road or Route 116, that's a state highway. I don't know if anybody's talked to VTrans about how they would like to see a path intersect here, or how the path would then go down Route 116 and intersect with Tilly Drive. There's a lot of complexities here, and that's really all I'm saying, is that this is a complex decision, and it is one that should be taken with that community-driven scoping process to really highlight what the issues would be and what the right infrastructure is. And that's essentially what I kind of found when I was reviewing the recommendations here. I think that often when we go forward with these types of things, making sure that it's the right infrastructure for the right place is very important. And I'll just leave it there, and happy to answer any questions if anything else comes up.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, no, this is Evan again. The one last thing I will say on this is that, I hope that there is not a perception that, this is a discussion about cost. As I said, we're planning on putting in that Tilly Drive path. I mean, assuming that it's approved by the Development Review Board, we will plan on putting in that path regardless. We're just saying there should be a process that goes and takes into account, the neighbors as well as the kind of the general public's perception of this. But the reality of the situation is we're going to be pulling zoning permits for years on this overall site. And if this is a transportation improvement fee, we're going to continue to be, basically tapped to pay for this. So it's not us saying we don't have an interest in paying for it. We just want to make sure it's the right improvement and that it fits the location. And I'll let it rest at that.
And just to the last point that I think we made in our letter was that the sort of the path that we're proposing is a viable alternative that connects people to destination points, right? It gets you to the Red Barn Market, it gets you to the existing bike and pedestrian infrastructure, and it sort of opens a valve to connect our project and to serve our project. The Tilly Drive study has recommended an important regional traffic improvement, and they recommended a next step of a scoping study to determine what that should look like. And we feel like our alternative has relieved our development of the immediate pressure that not having that connection would create, and enables the space for that public process to continue, for them to follow, a statutorily defined process of creating a recreational impact fee, and for us to contribute to that over the course of our project, as we develop the homes within the project. And so, you know, there's no point here where we're no longer, you know, getting our final plat doesn't relieve us of the obligation to contribute to the path. And I think we just wanted to make sure that was understood.
Yeah, I don't want them to contribute to the path. I want them to build the path. And I don't, I'm sorry, Marla, I think this business about community-driven process is off the point. I mean, I believe, stop me if I'm misperceiving our authority and responsibility, but whether or not to approve either a sidewalk or a rec path or anything else that goes into that right-of-way lies, or to require, lies with us. That we're charged with that responsibility, and kicking it into some wider sphere does nothing for anybody. We have the requisite expertise, both from the private developer, who seems open to having, I think I'm quoting from their expert, some sort of path or sidewalk, and our own consultants, and we don't need to overcomplicate it, and let the project go ahead without having the path or the sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Frank, and also, you know, we are, not to say we're designing it by committee, but, you know, we've had a lot of public input, we've had a lot of committee input, we've had the board input, we've expert testimony, we've done site visits. We're not responding or commenting about this issue in a vacuum, you know, and I think that what the board has sort of indicated is a willingness to sort of look at alternatives that, you know, offer some compromise, but I think we've kind of established our priorities and our focus here, which is long-term pedestrian safety, you know, over sort of short-term simplicity of avoiding a conflicted or, you know, complicated situation. And I think, you know, being open to some creative solutions, you know, you've heard from, you know, the willingness to look at, but I don't think that we've sort of undertaken this direction and guidance, you know, independently as just a board. We've got a lot of testimony and input from committees, staff, you know, departments, and you know, I think we've given enough flexibility and latitude for the developer to come back with some solutions.
Hello?
Oh, hi, Dan, you're back.
Yeah, computer crashed. Where are we?
So Mark was just commenting that we've gotten a lot of input into this decision, and it's not being made in a vacuum.
Right.
Yeah. My also concern is that if we don't address it now, just contributing to it in the future, we won't get another sort of, I guess, bite at the apple. You know,
Right.
You know, I think addressing it for a problem or a project that we have before us, and taking public input, taking committee input, taking staff input, taking the city department input, and proposing and coming up with a solution is what we need to do for the infrastructure project that we have before. And that is our task and our responsibility.
I think Mark is hinting at this, but I would just like to add that it seems as though I'm sure that the board has the ability to say, this is the general thing, do the design, and we'll review the design at final plat. You know, this is not the final, it shall be exactly, you know, 8 feet wide, and it shall be exactly this far from the edge of pavement, and it shall be exactly this. I think that I know that the decision can outline some general parameters and say, we'll hash out the details at final plat.
Exactly.
Sounds like a good plan to me.
I would support that approach only because this is an important issue, but I don't feel it needs to delay further work on the rest of the development. So I like that solution, and we can certainly set parameters in our decision.
I agree with Mark and Dan.
Yeah, I do too.
Where do we stand on public comment on this item?
I think we should definitely hear from the public so that we have their input and their opinions and comments before so that when we move forward, we can take those into consideration.
Sounds good. Delilah, do you have the list of the order of people that showed up who want to testify on this issue? So we can, is it in the, I don't know if it's in the chat or something else, but do you have a running list of people?
Marla Weiner is on.
Yeah.
And I believe there's also Brian Armstrong, but I'm not sure if he wants to speak.
Okay.
And
Any
then,
other-
there's the Gateses, but I don't know if they're here for this item. They are. Okay, so the Gateses are also here.
Okay, who was first in the chat? Marla or Brian?
It's switched a few times because when power went out, I'll just pick one. Yeah.
All right.
So
All right, we'll go with the screen here. So I'm looking at my screen. Marla, you're highest on the Hollywood squares, so go ahead. Flip your mic on there, Marla, and we're good. Marla, we know you want to go ahead? Pop your
Maybe
mic on.
with your mic.
Yeah.
she was having connection problems earlier. I'm not able to unmute her. I don't know why.
Marla, can you unmute yourself? There you go. You're green now. Go ahead.
No. I think she's
Ah,
still
boy.
having speaker. I think we've had this problem with Marla before where we can see her, but we can't hear her. In other meetings, we've had that situation.
Okay, Marla, you want to keep working on that? Check your microphone settings and all, and then I'm gonna go to, I guess we'll go to Brian Armstrong. Go ahead, and Marla, keep working on your mic there. Go ahead, Brian. Oh, your mic's, looks like you're
Unmute.
muted too.
Why is-
There you go.
There you
Yeah,
go.
there you go.
First and foremost, thank you for the board for hearing me out. And I apologize at any point in this if I become emotional. Because I'd like to first and foremost politely challenge Mark Baer. Last I knew, the census of 19 said there was 19,000 residents in South Burlington. We've sampled the residents of Old Farm Road and the applicant. Maybe a couple bike ped committees and a staff member. I support fully the applicant's right to develop. I also support the applicant's, traffic person, Corey Mack, that really argues this needs to be part of a major scoping process. I'm looking at the intersection. Well, I can't really see it because of the landscaping that you guys will politely remove. So all the floodlights, the headlights will come in my house. The noise barriers will go away. And I can tell you in the morning, that is a very busy intersection with the traffic light that you have going in at Tilly Drive right now. There is going to be difficulty getting from Old Farm Road onto 116 to head south. That will exist as soon as that traffic light is in. So my point there again being, there should be a major scoping process to analyze with Vermont Trans, Derby Circle, Butler Farms, the development that's going up across the interstate, because it's all going to affect this. And I feel that if the board moves forward in this, they're going to do a variety of things. First and foremost, they're going to shortchange the citizens and taxpayers of South Burlington. One, because they're going to improperly and inadequately study and scope the entire project to deal with it. And tabling it saying, hey, we'll just deal with the actual designs later, doesn't really work because it's not going to require a scoping process. With tremendous respect and humor, the only scoping going on is something that occurs more like at the hospital right now. Now, with that being said, I think the board is going to be short-sighted not to do a scoping process because I think once again, dead-ending the south end of Old Farm Road is really the only way to mitigate traffic queue buildup onto that light of Tilly Drive. And if you're worried about the pedestrians, first and foremost, I had a wonderful staycation here last week. There's hardly any traffic. Walking, running, jogging, so forth and so on. But the better way to do that possibly would be at a dead end of the road, then make it more actually suitable. The other thing I express serious concern about, and where you may potentially shortchange the citizens of South Burlington, is, and I apologize, folks, I don't want to operate, because you'll probably win. The city has more money and resources than neighbors do combined. But there's already talks amongst the neighbors of joining forces to hire legal counsel with action against the city, not against the applicant. Because we feel that the procedural missteps of not scoping this properly are so significant, it's going to compel us to pool our hard-earned resources. Now, Green Mountain Power will probably move the lines with no problem. After all, you own the land. Who pays Green Mountain Power? The city, the citizens and part of South Burlington. I know from owning this land, 2 inches deep, parts across that front lawn, there's ledge. You're gonna, when they put in water across this, my house was connected to city sewer, they busted 2 $500 drill bits in one day. So you may end up blasting, which may impact foundations to neighbors. We have old houses, that's right. They're more susceptible from damage to blasting that I assure you will occur from digging in this land for 25 years. Now, the other concerns that I have is, and I will politely, again, with tremendous respect, challenge this board. Back to the lack of scoping, I feel this is, and this may sound insulting, and I do not mean it as such, a side door process with which to get this bike path through, as opposed to whoever really owned it would have to file a permit, file designs, file depth. Is it going to be 5 feet? Is it going to be 8 feet? And all you're saying right now is table it down the road, kick it down the road. So when you do that, what's going to end up happening is, and I'm in real estate, which means I respect the right of our applicant neighbor to develop, the need, the tremendous need for housing in this state and in this city. But you are ultimately going to delay it for years because it will be appealed at every single step as much as possible in the environmental court, state court, and federal court if necessary. And that's unfortunately binding the applicant to your process of not properly, in my opinion, possibly wrong, scoping this project. And when you do that, you're going to tie up the applicant's ability to deliver housing units, which is only going to drive the lack of affordable housing in the area and the housing prices and pressures for South Burlington residents. So I implore the city of South Burlington, this board, to approve the applicant's request to put the path on their land, on Pizzagalley's land. And I'll remind this board, they approved a 3-acre variance to 1 acre for the Red Barn Deli. Well, guess what? You guys keep talking about the traffic to the Red Barn Deli. You created it. So once again, we've got Pizzagalley who benefited from the variance. They offered the free bike path across their land. You got the applicant who is being basically kidnapped onto the neighbors' objections and court challenges to this, all because we're trying to avoid more properly scoping and weighing in, getting input from 19,000 as opposed to 50 people. I'm just guessing. And the real fact of the matter is, if the city wants to build this, it's my opinion, the city should file the zoning application. Folks, I respect and I apologize. I respect your time and I apologize if I offended any of you. But excuse my language, this is asinine. The neighbors don't want it, the applicants don't want it, and yet you're refusing to go to a proper scoping process. We're not going to know if we need to blast, if we need to ledge. It's going to be 2 feet, it's going to be 5 feet, it's going to be 10 feet. We're just saying, hey, put a requirement in, we'll deal with it down the road. This is a miscarriage of our consumer dollars because there's going to be court challenges galore. I implore the city.
Thanks, Brian. Brian, any other last comments, additional comments and new comments?
Yeah, I implore the city, reopen the discussion of dead-ending the south end of Old Farm Road and respect the traffic study in the guidance document that said it should be properly scoped, because it's not being scoped properly now. And you're going to delay this project for years if you do it like this. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Marla, you got mic or? Still muted right now, Marla.
Marla, you can come on down to my house if you want to talk to these guys.
How's that?
There you go, yes.
I'm on my
Alright.
phone. Hallelujah. Hi.
Go
So
ahead.
you can hear me all right now?
We can, Marla, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to reiterate my strong support for everything that Brian has brought up. I also thought the testimony of Corey Mack was very eye-opening and very well thought through. Years ago, I've said this before, my husband and I happen to be one of the longest term residents still remaining on Old Farm Road. And for years, at numerous development review board meetings, when discussions came up about development being approved along Old Farm Road, assuming by the O'Brien family, we had been assured that there would be great weight put on the idea of dead-ending Old Farm Road in order to maintain this very old existing neighborhood. Personally, we feel that should have been included in the planning and the approval for this huge, huge development that's going in on both sides of the road. If it wasn't happening, you wouldn't have any reason or need to take land away from anyone or worry about anyone's safety, walking or riding or biking between the new development outlet on Old Farm Road and Heinsberg Road. It's a dangerous intersection. I believe it's one of the most dangerous intersections in the city. So we understand that there are lofty goals to have connections. We cannot understand, the neighbors and I cannot understand why this small stretch of this, one of the last remaining beautiful historic rural type streets in the city needs to be thrown under the bus, because people who will have an alternative route to do anything they want to do that is already being proposed by the developers and paid for by the developers, because of somebody's whim that they want to be able to get from the new exit or entrance onto Old Farm Road to Heinsberg Road. You all approved putting that little deli there. Nobody wanted that deli there. Developers wanted that deli there. We do not need that there, and we do not utilize it. And we just feel very strongly that this is a very ill-conceived idea, and that we should not be, as I say, we should not be the ones that have to suffer for having this encroaching development all around us. And then on top of that, someone's lofty ideas about how they want everything connected by being able to walk and bike every little inch of South Burlington. I'm sorry, I sound very emotional about this. I feel very strongly about it, and I feel very disserved by my representatives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marla. Any other board members? Excuse me, any other members of the public?
The Gateses,
Yeah. Gates, you go ahead.
Do we have Jessica and Jeremy?
Yeah. I see Jessica and Jeremy. You're live. Go ahead.
Hello. I would like to just make note to my prior testimony, I guess, and then just add that we continue to support Evan and Andrew's existing plan. We think that they've come up with really good alternatives. We would not like to see any paths or destruction of the landscape. At the site visit, I mentioned that the noise is already a huge factor for us here from the interstate, and if we cut down any more trees, it's just going to get worse. I also just want to note that there is hardly any bike traffic, so I don't know who is thinking that that is necessary, but we see maybe one bicyclist a week on this road. I will concede that there are pedestrians. It's not a lot of pedestrians, but there are some pedestrians. And of course, we want those people to be safe, but we think that there are alternatives. And to put so much weight into the fact that there need to be accommodations for bicyclists, there just are none. And so I don't know why that's being prioritized over all of the other factors. And if a study is needed in order to figure that out, then that's what should be done. Thank you.
Thanks. Jeremy, anything to add?
Can anyone hear me?
My wife covered it beautifully. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other members of the public? All right, thanks. What's the pleasure of the board here? Dawn, that's you talking. It's a lot of echo. I'm not sure what's going on. Brian, is that a question for staff of the board, or is this a comment? You just muted yourself. If it's a clarifying question, go ahead.
The question I'll ask is, if there was truly proper input, why did I just find out about this 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago? I live on the road. So if proper input's been had, and we have this community of 19,000, why did a resident just find out about 4 or 5 weeks ago? That's the question. Thank you.
I'll let Marla can speak to how long this issue's been known.
I was just contacted by the city 4 weeks ago about this. Now, I respect the neighborhood was heading up, but my point being, it's not properly scoped because I respected their rights to develop. I didn't know the city was requiring them to develop on my land. So I challenge that, and that's going to be the basis of the actions. Thank you.
If the board would like me to go over the responsibility of the board and the public notice process, I would be happy to do so. But the board, I think, is very familiar with it. It's been in the staff comments what the responsibility and public process is. So if you'd like me to reiterate it, I'd be happy to, or we can just discuss any questions.
You can just say what was the first date of the first, I mean, this application's been a live issue for a couple of years now, the whole overall development, and then the issue of the transportation along Old Farm Road has been in the public domain for how long?
Since before my tenure with the city, I started in about 4 years ago. But this first hearing on preliminary plat was in February of this year, and the first hearing on sketch plan, Andrew, I want to say was about a year before that. Is that right?
And aren't you considered an abutter? And I don't mean to use that term. Somebody accused us of using that term inappropriately, but as an abutter, haven't you been notified by mail of this project since the sketch plan stage?
Mr. Armstrong hasn't about the project.
I'm sorry?
He's not in the butter.
Mr. Armstrong is not a butter of the project.
All right, thanks. Does somebody have two devices on, or does somebody have a phone and a computer going at the same time? Okay, thanks. I think it might have been you, Don, with all due respect. And now you're muted, so, Don. Is that a question, Jeremy, or a statement?
Just on the last point, I believe we are abutters to the project, being that it is in our backyard of our property. We've never received any notice by mail. The only reason we know about all of this is because Andrew has educated us on it in person. Yeah, we've never been given any. Okay.
Thank you for that. The board can look at the record of who is in a butter and all the documents filed and move on from there. What's the pleasure of the board now on the application before us? Is there a motion we want to do as far as this?
Was there any other items that we needed to address, or was it the roundabout and the?
I think we covered the roundabout, and then we collected testimony and materials regarding both of the items in the staff notes. Marla, is there anything we haven't covered?
No. There is. Okay. You have covered everything. Let me say that in the affirmative.
Okay. All right. So the question is, do we need to collect any more information? Or are we comfortable making a motion on preliminary plat application?
Well, I move that we close the hearing on preliminary plat application. Isn't that what's appropriate at this point?
I'll defer to staff and those with more experience on that.
No, absolutely. I think I understood the question you to be asking was whether the board was in agreement that it was ripe to close.
So could I just make one, maybe more comment? So I just think I understand the discussion that you guys are having and the direction that you're heading. I think the point that was made was that the decision could be written in a way that was sort of flexible. It appears as though a number of alternatives were proposed in the staff comment: 5-foot path, 8-foot path, 10-foot path. There doesn't seem to be a specific consensus from the board or the community as to what that appropriate infrastructure is. And so I guess, the request would be that we can create a proposal and not have something, not have a decision that says you'll add X, but rather to have the flexibility to propose something that might work in the situation. Does that work? Is that what the board was thinking?
I think we hear you. I think the tone of the discussion, of all the board members tonight was exploratory in nature. And we have a motion by Frank to close the hearing. So I think we have the information.
Recognizing as well, we also need to, make a final plat proposal, which is going to require, extensive construction drawings and details for the path that's proposed. I think, we'll have to sort of work through the details of that with staff. The other request I would have is if the fee in lieu of option could be preserved in terms of, how we work through who constructs this and what that relationship is. I think there are certainly issues with a private developer constructing in the public right of way adjacent to people's homes. The city, I believe, has immunity from civil lawsuits pertaining to damage from blasting or removal of trees or things like this that we don't. We're going to have to work through, what that looks like. It may or may not be possible. The fee in lieu of maybe a necessity in order to sort of facilitate a successful project here. And so if we could just preserve flexibility on that aspect as well, to work with the Department of Public Works, city staff to figure out, a solution here that gets this thing where you guys are looking to get it, that would be helpful.
Like to call,
I think,
like to
yeah, I
call
think I-
at this point.
Okay.
We looking for a second?
I think we need a second on the motion, yes.
I'll second.
Thanks, Alyssa. And then so again, I think what we've heard tonight is the board has enough information about the staff comments, the public comment, the comments of the applicant, to craft a decision that captures the direction that's appropriate. So we have a motion to close the hearing on SD-20-400 500 Old Farm Road preliminary plat application. The motion has been seconded. Is there any further discussion by the board members?
Yeah, I think just to comment that, we have 45 days to issue our decision. And I suspect we're going to have a couple deliberative sessions prior to even crafting our decision and giving staff a direction so that we can now discuss these issues in detail. Obviously, we won't be taking any additional testimony, but I feel comfortable we've gotten what we need to at least be able to deliberate and provide pretty clear direction to the applicant and what we're going to be looking for in final plat.
Thank you. Any other board members? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to close the hearing on the preliminary plat application, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any nay votes? And any abstentions? And then Marla, we do have Stephanie not participating, right? Any other recusals besides her?
Nope, just Stephanie. So 6
Okay.
in favor.
That's it. All right. Thank you very much to the applicants. Thank you very much for the members of the public. I appreciate you sticking through the rain, the thunderstorm and all that stuff. So appreciate the input, and the process continues. And again, as Mark alluded, it'll be 45 days, and I think it's pretty clear the board's going to take some time with this decision.
Okay. Thank you all. We appreciate everybody's attention. It's been a big project and a slog to get to this point. So we appreciate all the efforts from the board and staff and the public. Have a good night.
Thank you all. All right. 9 o'clock. If everybody's okay, we'll keep grinding on. Don, you okay with me getting my little, what's the word? Extended relief. Taking some middle innings pitching. So here. Save our bullpen. Frank, do you have a comment there? Your hand raised?
Yeah, I have I don't feel I should be sitting for the Von Turkovich application.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now
excuse me, Dan, does that mean I'm excused? Or is there some deliberation I have to come back for? What happens now? Can I just leave?
Marla, help me out here.
Given the time, I do not anticipate deliberating afterwards. And the items we have to deliberate on are relatively, I think you're excused. Let me get to the point.
Okay. Thanks, Marla. Thank you, Frank.
That means I'm excused. You were breaking up a little bit.
You're excused, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I will just add, when I unmute Dawn, she is creating feedback. She's on the computer and also on the phone line. When I unmute her phone line, that's where we're getting that feedback from. So just to be aware that I have to unmute her for short bits or else the feedback starts to build.
Okay.
Dawn, you can actually, on your second device, under settings, go to where it says phone, and then there's a big red button that says turn off computer audio. And that should solve the problem.
Audio settings,
Well, you're working now through whatever you're doing without the phone.
oh, wait, the phone's on.
Yeah, that's why we were getting feedback, because you had your computer and your phone on.
I thought I don't know how to turn it off. It's not, don't.
I can kick you out by
Throw it
phone.
out the window.
I'm going to dismiss your phone, Dawn.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
I'm
Moving-
sorry.
That's
I'm being
okay.
difficult tonight.
Moving
I'm
right
like-
along, agenda item 7. So for the record, Frank Cookman has left, Stephanie Wyman is back. Preliminary plat application SD-20-19 of 600 Spear Street FJT, LLC for a plan unit development on the existing 8.66 acre lot developed with 7,000 square feet storage building and single family home. The plan unit development consists of one 6.6 acre lot containing 32 dwelling units and 4 family buildings. A 1.24 acre lot containing the storage building and existing single family home proposed to be converted to a duplex. And a third lot containing proposed city streets, 600 Spear Street. Who is here for the applicant? Okay, I see Frank von Turkovich. Who you got with you, Frank?
Lucy Thayer, Abby from Trudell, I believe, is with us. Andrea Dotolo from Trudell. Got the full team.
Okay. I believe we're going to need to swear you in. I don't have the magic words in front of me, Marla. Do you have the magic words, or Delilah or Dawn?
I can do that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good,
I'll
Dawn.
turn it back over to you.
Please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Marla, do you want me to do the applicant recap first and then staff comments? The first time we've heard this, right?
This is the first time we've heard this, yes. I would suggest a little summary of where we are, what's happened since we saw you at Sketch, and then when you're ready, jump into the staff comments.
Okay, before we start that, for the record, I do know I've worked with Frank von Turkovich before in my capacity as a regional planning commission staff member running the Brownfields program. We did support some of the environmental studies there. However, I do not think it will affect my ability to rule impartially on this matter. So go ahead, Frank and team, just give a recap here.
Okay, Abby, you want me to start and then turn it over to you? Okay, so last December, we asked the city council for permission to move this project forward. And the council, after a couple of hearings, agreed that what we were proposing was close enough to what the planning commission was planning for changes to the city's LDRs to let us proceed. Once we had the city council approval, we brought the concept plan, a sketch plan to the development review board. And after getting feedback from the board and working with staff, we have further refined the plan and submitted a complete application to move ahead with this, and are before you tonight to ask you to look at our preliminary plat submission. Not a lot has changed with the project layout, with the basic plan. It's very close to what you saw earlier this year, and but we have resolved a number of technical issues that are important, and I'd like to talk about that tonight.
Right, I can take over. Marla, do you have the rendering that Lucy sent over yesterday? Maybe that would be a nice one to display, the color site rendering 2D.
Sure, yeah, and just so you know, Delilah's running the projector.
Sorry, I only saw your, I saw you. Delilah, please, if
Makes
you
it
would.
weird
Thank
later on.
Okay. All right. So this, yeah, thanks for the introduction, Frank. And I'll just walk you through, first of all, in GoToMeeting, is there like a laser pointer or a way that I
You
can?
can draw, attendees can draw. You have the ability to grab tools.
Okay, I'll use words to describe then. So this is the next iteration of a sketch plan that some of you have seen before. This is the preliminary plan version. And what we're proposing is to connect a new city street to Spear Street in the location where an existing single-family home has a driveway. And that new city street will run east-west along the south side of the property. Where the pink line stopped, thank you for whoever's drawing, that new city street, thanks Lucy, will run north-south with the intention of in the future connecting to the UVM parcels to the north and to the south. That's going to be a future street that the applicant is hoping will be taken over by the city. Off of the new city street is a new private loop road with on-street parking. And that roadway network will serve 8 quadplex buildings for a total of 32 new apartment units. Within the site, we have 61 on-street parking spaces, on-street or off-street in smaller parking lots, just sort of spread out over the site, and that would accommodate the guests and residents of this piece. Proposed water connection would be a municipal water connection off of Spear Street, near the location where the new city street intersects Spear Street. Wastewater disposal is a municipal pump station. And right now the current plan is to directional drill underneath I-89 to the east and pump wastewater into a gravity sewer system on the east side of I-89. That is an overall landscaping is mainly a mixture of different species of street trees. Here's a rendering that was prepared by Lincoln Brown, illustrating the architectural style of these quadplex buildings, and also gives you an idea of how the development fits within the surrounding landscape. So that's really the engineering in a brief overview. Lucy or Andrea, do you have any general items to add before we get to staff comments and board questions?
I don't think so. I would just reiterate what Abby said, in that, we've created a strong streetscape presence. The look and the feel of this neighborhood development has been really important. We've worked with staff to get something that fits on this site and is cohesive and speaks to the vernacular of the agricultural uses in the area and the farms to the north and south. So, yeah.
Thanks very much. Go back to the staff comments, unless some of the board members had some quick questions they need clarified right now after that introduction. Okay. Let's see. Bottom of. Let's see. Can we get the staff comments? Bottom of page 2.
Dan, can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Sure. In terms of the site layout, I totally understand why you're doing the private versus public road circulation, but will there be any sort of delineation or differential between what's city street and what's the private drive? From a perspective standpoint, like, perception of you're coming down the road and continuing on as a private drive, but if you turn left, it stays a public city street. I know you're doing it because, you can't park perpendicularly on a public street, so it's more like a big driveway. But is it going to read as more of a public street?
I think it is, Mark. The intention was to make the interior of the project feel like the continuation of the city street model, if you will. So it'll feel like, it'll feel very formal. We have sidewalks, we have street trees, we have a kind of a rectilinear layout there, which once you're inside the project, a person driving or walking into the project really won't know when they're in or out of a public street location.
Okay. All right, thank you for the clarification.
I'll add that the private road will be 2 feet narrower than the new city street. So visually it should look a little bit different.
And will there be a,
Echoing something that the board said at Sketch, which was make them not feel like public streets. Just to remind the board that that was the feedback that they provided at Sketch.
will there be signage saying if the street is not plowed, call Frank?
Right. Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So item number 1, staff, does the applicant have any comment on comment number 1 on the bottom of page 2 there?
Yes, I do. I'd like to address that. So the existing single-family house that's located on the corner of that's located on Spear Street is part of the project, part of the property that we acquired to do this project. And that acquisition was made earlier this year. We soon realized that we needed to try to put that house back into operation, if you will, to try to generate some revenue from it. But it's a big house, so and our plan was always to convert it into a duplex. So what we have done is we have separated the 4-bedroom section of the house from a suite that exists over the garage area. And that suite area will become another unit that we will rent to put it on the market as soon as we have permission from the city to do that. But I think Marla's, and she can speak for herself on this, but I think Marla's point is that we have taken steps to actually make that separation in the house. So we need to address this immediately with the city, and we intend to either do it as part of this permit process that the DRB is working with us on, or if we can do it more efficiently or more quickly, working directly with staff, we will do it that way. But regardless, we want to make sure we're in compliance, and we intend to make sure that we are.
Thanks, Frank. And Marla, what's your recommendation for him as far as just do a straight up zoning application?
Yeah, Delilah and I had the opportunity to discuss, and we think it's faster, and there's no advantage to doing it as part of this project, so it should just be done as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Make it kosher. Okay, thanks. Items number 2 and number 3 both deal with updating the computations. Comments of Frank and consultants come on items number 2 and number 3 on page 3.
Abby, I'll turn that over to you, if you will.
Sure. Yep. And we can provide the separate computations for lot A to be lot A and lot B at final. I mean, I understand that the road needs to be in its own right of way, so that creates a lot for itself. And then there will be the commercial lot, and then the new lot with the 32 units on it, and that's something that we'll be able to provide. I think we show that from an overall perspective, we meet the coverage calculations, and perhaps at final, once we do the calculations on the individual lots, we'll find that we may need to ask for a waiver if we don't meet the lot coverage requirements. But I think we've shown as a whole we will meet those coverage requirements.
Okay, thanks. And staff has also, thank you. Staff has also identified some issues with the use of the building. We no longer qualify as commercial because it's supposed to be common space for the residents. And the applicant has requested a waiver to reduce the front setback. Does the board members have any comments on both of those issues?
There's a little bit more later in the staff comments about the front setback.
Okay. All right, and then, so with the existing use, so the existing use is commercial, is that still actively being used, or is it okay if it just converts to residential? Is there anything that needs to be fixed as far as that building goes, Marla?
No, it just means that it's more by way of explanation. The front setback coverage is relevant today and will not be relevant when the project is approved.
And reverting back to the underlying zoning is.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much.
Okay, and right, and just to clarify, for us, the use will be commercial for use by residents, but not by offsite.
So commercial, no, it will be an accessory to the residential use.
Okay.
Will not be commercial.
No group,
Unless you're proposing to have like, a business incubator or something there, which is a thing we can talk about, but we'd like to talk about it now if that's what you're really proposing.
Or is it going to be home-based business? I don't know.
Yeah, let me try to clarify. When we spoke with the city council and we spoke with the DRB about this earlier in the year, there is a concept we just have not focused on programming the floor space of the building. But there is an intention that in the future, there would be uses in the building that would be, I guess, commercial in character, because the existing use of the building is commercial, and it had, historically, it has been a much heavier use. We don't propose and wouldn't propose to go back to the sort of industrial use that the buildings had in the past, but as an accessory to the project, it would provide employment opportunities, workspace. We certainly are thinking about storage space for the units that would be part of the project. Some amenities for the residential units as well, like we talked about a workshop and a bicycle maintenance area. So it's just, we just don't have a complete focus yet on specifically what those uses might look like, but we would propose to come back to the city and talk about that.
Yeah, so your application just mentioned the sort of accessory residential uses like bike parking and, storage and that sort of thing. So staff had understood that this was no longer going to be commercial, it was going to be accessory to the residential use. If there is the intention to have commercial uses in there, that's not necessarily a problem. That just needs to be part of your application and needs to be vetted. We'll need to determine what type of use it is and whether that needs conditional approval or whether it's even allowed in this zoning district. So that's a pretty big thing.
Significant.
It needs to be figured out. And we can't say without having those conversations whether it's going to be a challenge or if it's going to be an easy thing to do.
Right, thank you. We understand that, Marla. It's just since we don't know today or probably won't know in the near future what those uses might look like, we were hoping that we could leave that aside as a future discussion with the city once we have those opportunities in front of us.
Okay, well, if I'm looking at the allowable
Can I just say that the underlying zoning is
where I was
residential?
going.
Yeah, and if you revert back to, right now, the commercial is a non-conforming use. If you remove the non-conformity, it can't be reestablished.
Right, we don't want to remove the current use. We are using it now as part of our business operations, which is a continuation of what was happening before, but we would propose to transition at some point into some other uses that we realize we'd have to ask the city's permission for.
So that needs to be continuous as part of this process,
Yeah.
is what Delilah is saying. If you stop using it as an existing nonconformity for
more than
months
6
or more,
months,
you lose
you
that
lose the
approval.
ability to continue it sometime
Right.
down the road.
So you need to amend your application to say that and continue commercial use in such and such a way consistent with the previous approval so that you don't lose that. Because right now your application says it's going to be bike parking and it's going to be storage units and it's going to be whatever. And that's not a commercial use.
It can't go on indefinitely if it's not actively being used.
Okay, we'll work with staff to clarify that immediately. Yeah.
So board is, I guess this is kind of sprung on us, and I'm not sure. So Lila, what are your thoughts on preliminary versus final for sorting this out?
I think we need to have it clarified.
Before we close preliminary? I have room for them on the next
Yeah.
agenda.
Yeah.
If we want to continue.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else, we get through everything and there's no other big hanging questions and the board feels ready to close. I think our recommendation at this time is to work really hard over the next couple days just to make sure that this preliminary plat is closed with the right information. And then we would just continue this hearing to the very next meeting. I would work with Frank over the next couple days and we'd sort this out.
Okay.
But let's see where we are with all the other stuff.
Okay.
Marla, or Dan, can I interject here?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think one thing, I think this is definitely an issue of Frank working out with Marla and Delilah the solution. But I think something we've always done in the past is, look at what the underlying approval in the zoning district allows, and then look at what would be a complementary use for the property and the proposed development, and come up with sort of like some approved uses that, as Frank wants to develop his business model down the road, he has the flexibility of just working with Delilah for zoning permits. But if he goes outside of that, it would trigger having to come back to the board to review on a per use basis. But this gives him some flexibility to look at some things he might want to do down the road that allows him to change over the businesses without having to come back to us every single time. But allows us to know some control over what might go in here in the future.
That's a totally admirable sentiment. And this zoning district is one of the most residential of the residential.
Yes.
So the opportunities for allowing a broad array or even a narrow array of uses is actually pretty limited. This is the R4.
Okay. Okay.
But in many zoning districts, that's a great suggestion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Moving along, item 4. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide architectural elevations demonstrating compliance of the existing building to be retained with this criterion. Staff recommends that the board determine whether it should be prior to closing preliminary plat or in the final plat stage review. Board members' comments? Applicant?
Yes, this brings us back to the question we were just talking about, I think. We have explored a number of different ideas for how to modify the existing steel building that would make it more conducive to other uses. I think what we would like to do, or like to ask the DRB to let us do, is to come back with those exterior modifications once we have a better program for the uses. We know that you need to know that before we take steps for other uses, but it's just too early to present plans for the exterior of the building until we're there.
Board members, is that acceptable?
Abby, I don't know if you can put up our perspective drawing again, the rendering. It shows the building in its context, and one of the things that we would probably, we would certainly propose to move ahead and install, landscaping, parking, lighting, all of those exterior landscape features would be done. It's just the physical changes to the building that might be wanted in the future in terms of window placement. We talked about a possible clerestory across the ridge, things like that. We won't know if they're workable until we actually have some possible uses for the interior.
Okay. Marla, board members?
This comment is about the criteria, our bugaboo here. Proposed structures shall be related harmoniously to themselves, the terrain, existing buildings and roads that have a visual relationship to the proposed structures. So, they have these buildings, you have elevations in your packet, there's some shown on the screen right now. The question here is, okay, these buildings are nice. How do they relate to the existing building? And so since you're proposing to reskin the existing building, are they related? And does the board want more information on that now or at final plat?
Well, if I may continue, just to respond to that, because this is something that we did think about early, and I believe we had some conversations with the city about this at the outset. We really see value in keeping the steel building. One of the earliest thoughts was, hey, should the steel building remain in place or should we consider demolishing it? It's been there a long time. It's part of the streetscape, if you will, on Spear Street. It relates strongly to the buildings that are at the UVM farm and even to some extent to the buildings that are across the street on the west side of Spear Street, some of which are not visible, but they do exist. It's part of a mixed use area that it's one of the things that we liked about this project is that the connection to the farmland, the very existence of the steel building is something that sort of in some ways feels comfortable today. So we decided that it would be best to continue that farm development theme. So the houses that we proposed, they do relate to the colonial house on Spear Street, the large house that we were talking about, but they also look like they might be farm buildings or residential buildings that are close to an existing barn-like structure that the steel building represents. So we think keeping it intact as a organized development is something that is still really positive. I was specifically responding earlier to what the exterior of the building might change to look like. We don't propose putting bricks on it. We don't propose making it look like something other than a utility building, which it is today. We'd like to keep that sort of functional look to it in the future.
All right. Staff comments pretty clear that criterion is there and it's still operable. So think about it and we'll move on here and then just covering some more points here.
I guess I'd just like to hear from the board before you move on in response to Frank's most recent observation that they'd like to keep it looking like a functional building. Is that going to meet this criteria?
I'll dive in. I've driven around the property a little bit months ago, back in the dead of winter. I get that the farm landscape is not characterized necessarily by one type of building, but it's basically an odd commercial steel building. I don't see it relates much to anything right now. So to the extent the exterior can be modified to be less visibly obtrusive, especially the goal of the applicant to have it be quote unquote belong to the residents. There should be some linkage in style, et cetera. I realize sometimes that's putting the lipstick on it, but so be it. That's what we try to do when we approve developments, is bring some cohesion where there might not have been. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I mean, I think that unfortunately, it's sort of like without knowing what the use is going to be, and now hearing from Marla that there's a very limited number of uses, I think we need as a board more information to know how it's going to fit harmoniously within the development. This isn't sort of like a separate parcel and then you're proposing the development, behind it. This is all part of the same parcel and part of the same development, and you're proposing sort of integrating it, and it's not off the side or behind. It's sort of a kind of a focus piece that is throwing some landscaping and isn't really going to hide it. So I think giving some thought to what your use is going to be and how it's going to fit with the development, and then how it's going to look as it blends in with the rest of the development is a little more important than sort of kicking the can down the road. And I'm not sure if, I think we as a board and staff and as you as the applicant can talk about whether that has to be hashed out as preliminary or figured out, you can work on it and come back to us at final. But I do think it's something that we ultimately are going to need to sort of see your ultimate final use or proposed variety of uses and how the architecture is going to fit in with your overall neighborhood development, which I expressed a lot of support for at the initial meeting, and it hasn't wavered. I think it's a great little project. It's a great infill project. I really like the rectilinear pattern of it. So I think that this is a little more important than trying to figure out down the road respecting it's a Butler steel building, at this time.
Okay, we agree.
I agree. I have to be honest, it has an element of eyesoreness for me. But, we'll see what you can come up with.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other board members?
I would disagree with Don real quick that it does have an element of eyesoreness, but I think, it's got the large overhead doors. You can play off those. You can throw on some minor architectural elements, and it can get a little more successful, like a, Carnes, the arena, which has a similar feel to it, but you've got some architectural elements, and the use is sympathetic to that design. So I think looking at what your proposed use is, you can come up with some, I think, easy solutions and easy fixes, but I think you do need to look at it and come back with a proposal.
Yep, makes sense.
All right, thank you. Staff comment number 5 regarding dumpsters, facilities for solid waste. It's not shown on the plan, what's the applicant's plan for that?
Each building will have its own receptacles for solid waste. So there will be recycling and rubbish containers at each building. They will be serviced weekly or more often as needed. And again, each building has 4 units in it. So it'll be a fairly just diverse, it'll be spread out amongst the projects. So we will essentially have a route inside the development where the rubbish collection company will come in, empty out the units, bring those units back to their place in the hallway between the sections of the buildings. That's also where the bike storage areas will be located. And then residents will also have access to the larger collection facility that would be behind the steel building if something bigger needs to be disposed of.
Right, and if you wanted to pull up elevation A1, the first floor plan, the trash that Frank is talking about is shown, trash recycling area at each building.
Thanks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, board members, any other comment on this or no?
Just that I assume the trash recycling area will also have a dedicated composting area.
We haven't addressed composting inside the between the 2 sections of the building. That would be something that we'd have to understand how to safely do that in this location, or we'll have a centralized facility for that.
Okay.
I would just note that I just heard Frank say there'll be a dumpster at the larger common building. Is that shown on the plans, Abby?
It is.
Thank you. I did not notice it. I will look for it and we will provide comments if we have them.
So it's on the north side of the existing, the R right there.
Oh, R. Yeah, I didn't know what R was.
It doesn't look like it's labeled dumpster or trash. It's just a graphic representation of one.
All right, thank you. All right, nothing more on this. We'll move on to comment number 6 on top of page 8. regarding screening or buffering. So this is regards to no screening is proposed on the north side of the project. As noted above, the parcels to the north and south are in the agricultural institutional zoning district and are not zoned for development at this time. Staff recommends, the comment is staff, number 6, staff recommends the board require the applicant to provide screening to the north to protect the enjoyment of that lot. So we're protecting the agricultural lot from a view of the new homes. Is that what we're saying, Laura?
Yeah, and Dan, this is a little bit from, my experience with development in general. It's all well and good to say, well, that's already screened, or it doesn't need to be screened from anything. The standard is to screen dissimilar uses. And if at a later time that agricultural lot does see more use, it doesn't seem equitable to me to say, well, put in your own screening because you came in second.
Right.
So
Well,
I'm open to what you guys have to think about it, but that's sort of my personal feeling on this.
I would agree only from the standpoint of this is not a parcel located in Addison County or Franklin County where people are used to large agricultural operations. I mean, so not to say people wouldn't be aware that UVM is, but they may perceptually. So I think having landscaping there could nip a complaint in the bud of dust or, when they're tilling the field or things like that. So Frank, you have any comments on that? Or?
Yeah, we since it looks like we're going to have an opportunity to talk to staff a little bit more about some of these other issues, we'd like to explore that further with staff. One of the points that I'd make to the board tonight is that we like the idea that the farmland on both sides is somewhat visible. In fact, the field to the south that you can see on this rendering, which is somewhat open, is a real attractive feature. So we definitely want people in our project to be able to see that open landscape and have that long view. The land to the north is already, there is a fairly thick buffer. It doesn't show up really heavily in the wintertime, but there is a vegetated buffer to the north. We have focused our energy and resources to having really good interior landscaping without as much thought to the perimeter. So I guess we'd like to have a chance to talk to staff a little bit more about their thoughts of how much should be provided along that perimeter.
I mean, this is the board's decision. This isn't the staff's decision. I was just explaining where I was coming from with that comment. It's the board's call on whether they want to require this dissimilar use to be screened.
I guess my question.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead, Dawn. I ramble enough.
Well, I'm looking at the rendering and the applicant just noted that there's some screening. It looks to me like there's a lot of screening there. What were you thinking, Marla? Why did you think that's not adequate?
Sure. So some of that actually, well, if you could go to the third page of the plan set. I'm sorry, I don't know what sheet it is.
Yeah, LA 1-02. Delilah has.
Can you tell me the page number it is? That is more helpful because I don't see this little. I don't see in the packet. What number is it in the packet?
I don't have that in front of me. I'll get that up so I can in the future.
Because I can't see those little numbers.
Perfect. That one's perfect.
Okay.
So my point is that much of those trees are on the abutting property. And my experience has been that, well, it just doesn't seem equitable to require an abutter to retain trees because of something someone else did. So that's my point. It's ultimately up to you guys.
Okay, board members?
Well, one question I have is, what's the setback from the building to the property line on the north?
I believe it's 10 feet.
10 feet. So is that even enough distance to put some decent screening if we were to require screening along the north edge?
I think 10 feet is the minimum setback in that zoning district.
But I mean, in terms of being able to put some screening in to, because I see what your point is, Marla, that, the heavy screening to the north is predominantly on the adjacent property, and whatever is on Frank's parcel is going to be cut to put in the houses, so, what could we be doing to provide screening in a 10-foot slot?
Well, maybe 10 feet isn't the right setback.
Yeah,
They're
the scale's
proposing
about, I think we're about 15 feet where from the houses to the property, the northern property line. And I'm wondering if, maybe the compromise here is, screening any of the utilities, exterior ground mount utilities with fencing, providing low growing plantings. And I'm sorry, I know this is landscape architecture, Lucy, I'm sorry, but just, maybe not a hedgerow to screen whatever future tree clearing UVM decides to do, but more of a buffer should in the future those trees go away. It's not just, white side of building up against the property line.
One thing I would offer as the landscape architect here is that it is a challenging site condition if you have planting on the north side of the building that has there's less plants that will grow with screening capacity. So I think that 10 feet is adequate to put plants in. You can put trees and whatnot, but I would just caution that it would be best served kind of in between the buildings and not, I do not think that we could effectively accomplish a consistent hedgerow here from an actual logistical standpoint from plants.
Well, I'm going to ask this question to present an extreme. So know that I don't think this is necessarily the solution, but it is a solution. The board could say, okay, retain the trees on your lot and move everything further away. So that you're not planting new trees, you're just maintaining some of the existing screening on your own lot. And so, as the far opposite extreme of what's being proposed, that could be a solution.
I don't know how much that would require them to reconfigure the whole layout.
Probably a lot, and that's why I'm saying it's like a very extreme reaction, but I did want to, bracket.
I'd just like to follow up on Ms. Thayer's point. Before she was speaking, I thought to myself, well, it'd be nice to have some screening of those parked cars and a little landscaping, obviously not a hedge because you couldn't fit them, but at the corners of the building, northwest and the northeast corners of the building, that area where you could catch whatever appropriate things to grow, and then a little more screening on the commercial building or whatever, that existing building, I should say, and things like that as a way to beef it up a little bit out of consideration to the abutting lot. That's my thought. Board members?
No, I'm in agreement. I mean, I think that I don't see this as being something where we need to do just a line of screening to hide the project if anything ever goes in to the north and that hedgerow or the tree line on the UVM property goes away. I think planning for the future, if it ever goes away, to provide some selective screening so it softens the development. I'd like to see something. I'd like to see some proposal that does that. Just imagine the entire UVM parcel gets clear cut. What would we see, and what would you want to be seen? That's sort of the way I would look at it.
Thanks. Any other comments from the board before we move on? Okay. Staff comment number 7 on page 9. This is all regarding stormwater. Applicant indicated to staff they designed the system based on a request of the board at sketch of a distributed stormwater management system. Staff does not recollect such a comment and recommends the board discuss with the applicant the need to consolidate the stormwater system in order to reduce its impact on the site. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to discuss what they believe the solution might look like, provide feedback on whether they are on the right track. In particular, staff recommends the discussion address whether any other elements of the site be affected by a less distributed system. If so, whether those impacts are acceptable. Frank and staff, or Andrea, are you at this?
Yeah, so during our preliminary design, we headed down this path of looking at a dispersed stormwater system, or allowing our stormwater features to be integrated throughout the development. And as we got further and further down that path, it just ended up in numerous amounts of very small bioretention basins. And as we got comments back from DPW, it was very clear that they supported more of a community or a larger system. There's, a large maintenance cost associated with having numerous amounts of individual stormwater treatment areas. So we just wanted to discuss with you all at preliminary whether the board had interest in this integrated stormwater system or a more community system. I think, when I say community system, we would be looking at keeping 3 of the larger areas, the one between the new city street and the existing warehouse building, the one by building 5 and the one by building 4, and then potentially adding another larger system either in the northwest or the northeast corner of the site, depending on what we find when we get into more fine-tuned grading of looking at getting everything to flow in one direction. One big conflict with the stormwater system is just with this compact development, we have tons of utility crossings between sewer, stormwater, and water. So fitting all of those utilities in throughout the buildings and the roads is a challenge. And by having fewer stormwater treatment areas, we would have a little bit more room to get those separation distances between utilities.
Okay. Board members?
I know this is kind of a confusing topic. So in the picture that Delilah has up, almost every little red circle is a stormwater treatment practice. There's one in the top left corner that's a pump station, but every other little red circle is a stormwater treatment practice. So what Andrea is saying is that they're proposing to cut down from 30 or whatever to what, like 6?
Yeah, probably 4 to 6 at the most. Currently, we're looking at doing, this plan looks at doing bioretention systems or rain garden. Likely, if we were to reduce them, we would end up with either gravel wetlands or a combination of rain gardens and gravel wetlands.
So Marla, as our engineer, staff person, what are your thoughts about 4 to 6?
Well, I mean, Andrea just described that it'll help with their utility conflicts. One of the things noted in the staff comments is that there's so many of them that it actually gets in the way of the street presence. So that seems to be an improvement.
Okay.
Does anyone on the board recall saying like have a distributed stormwater system?
I don't recall that comment or that discussion. And I like the idea of going to, 4 to 6 consolidated stormwater areas. I think the idea of bioretention, rain gutter, swale areas are nice. But I think that, the idea that having 30 plus small areas does create conflict and sort of takes away from it becoming sort of like a pedestrian neighborhood. So I'd rather see 4 to 6 sort of consolidated ones that are focused than spread out throughout the whole development.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
Go ahead, Susan.
I was just going to say, I agree that it. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was going to say I agree that having 4 to 6 is probably a better design, just given that some of these, the Filterra units, they require a lot of maintenance, and every year they're going to have to file inspection reports with the state to comply with their permit application. And sometimes that maintenance, it gets recommended, but it doesn't always happen. And then these units can, they degrade over time and they don't do what they're supposed to do. So I think you get better treatment and easier maintenance in the future by spreading it to, 4 to 6 as opposed to having a lot of smaller units within the system.
What
other board members?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Frank.
No, I was just going to add that we appreciate that comment, and we have talked about this internally, and we agree that consolidating these smaller areas is a great idea. So we will present something to you at final or before that shows that we can accomplish that.
I was hoping for suspended footbridges over wetlands throughout, like some cool place in Germany. But I have a question about the larger treatment area. Perhaps Ms. Thayer can address it. Or is there a plan for some landscaping, amenities? I realize we don't want every stormwater pond to sort of turn into here is the community pond, but I have seen some creative things walking around, in Vermont and elsewhere. And so I'm just curious if there's plans to make that area on the east look less like it's the giant stormwater pond with a fence around it.
Yes, it will not be an open water system. So likely the larger one would be a gravel wetland, which has a soil cap on top of the stone, and then it is heavily planted. For a site like this, we would be looking at a specific planting plan for the gravel wetland. And I think that once we finalize the stormwater design, that's also something that would be included into the renderings. We can also provide landscaping around the stormwater treatment area, but generally these gravel wetlands are planted and well vegetated.
And we'll incorporate, to your point, we will not treat it like a, wetland that's in the back, that's back of house, but we'll definitely, it will be integrated into the actual project.
And then just curious, and I haven't looked at the plans in detail, and this isn't really a stormwater question, but is there a plan for any kind of community outdoor amenities, picnic tables, community gardens, gas grill area, place for people to gather? Because I must say I'm impressed with there's the development right behind me on Farrell, and I see people out there hanging out with their friends and having a picnic right in front of the apartment complex, there. So I'm just wondering, what's any plans for that here?
Yeah, Abby, can you put up the colored, or can we see the colored rendering site plan? That might be the best thing to look at.
Delilah's driving the show.
Delilah, thank you. Actually, do we have that plan? Thank you. So what you can see in the middle of it is our common area. And that is where, in addition to every apartment having its own private or what will feel like a private balcony, will be a balcony deck, and on the lower level underneath it will be a walkout patio deck for the lower level unit. All the units will share that area that's been marked in yellow there, which is we will build as more of a formal park area, but it'll certainly be open for programming to put up a picnic table or other kinds of community-centered uses that would fit into that. We haven't shown furniture per se, but that could certainly be included. So that's where we envision people getting together and having a party or a gathering or something of that sort. We're also looking at the extension of the new private road to the east as being a location that we're exploring right now to look at for gardening.
Okay.
do an actual community garden plot that would be fenced in to protect it from the deer and other animals, and that would be a place where people could actually do garden plots.
And it makes sense to maintain the rural character of the area, right?
Yep.
Is there any concern with like snow plowing in the winter? I feel like that area is possibly a snow storage spot as well, and how that could degrade the soils there for gardening.
Yeah, we'll probably push the garden area farther. So the garden would not start immediately at the end of that. There would be snow in the wintertime, but beyond that would be a dedicated garden zone.
Yeah, the snow storage would not commingle with any community gardens.
Right.
Right. We're coming up on the witching hour, so let's keep moving here. Number 7, staff comment number 8 on page 10. Regarding criteria for public and private roadways. Staff comment number 8, there are 20 dwelling units proposed to be accessed via private roads with 2 points of access on the proposed roadway. Staff considers that there may only be 19 dwelling units on the private street and recommends the board require the applicant to modify their plan to meet these criteria. Staff recommends the board discuss with the applicant their plan for addressing this comment and determine whether to require it to be addressed at this preliminary plat stage of review or allowed to be addressed at the final. Marla, can you explain this a little more for me?
Sure. So 1512D4, D3 says if you have a private road and it has 2 or more points of access onto an existing or proposed roadway, it can only serve 19 or fewer dwelling units. If you want more than that, it has to be public road. And if you want it to be public road, you can't have head-in parking. So I think it's in the applicant's interest here to have it be a private road, but then we have this issue of 19 dwelling units. I did count generously. Anything that had frontage on the private road, I did not count. So buildings 1, 2, and 3, I did not count.
Thank you. Yeah, we were caught kind of by surprise with this issue. Our mistake. We understand what the ordinance says. We'd like the board to know that we looked at so many different configurations for the way these buildings could be laid out. And when given the fact that in the R4 district, we're limited to 4 units per building, which is fine because we really like the sort of low scale and the neighborhood feel that we get with this type of building. The problem we have is that it's just difficult to arrange things and keep this sort of rectilinear plan and solve that problem. So we overlooked that. It hadn't come up earlier, so we hadn't addressed it prior to this. The only solution that we can propose tonight is that if the board cannot provide any kind of a waiver for that additional unit to let us go to 20, then we would probably have to propose eliminating building 6 because we really don't have an architectural solution right now that we're comfortable with. And that would just mean that we would lose 4 units on building 6 and bring us under that number. We would hope that we wouldn't have to do that because we really think that the concept here and the sort of the mission to build a project of this type and add these units is really important, but we don't see a viable design solution for this right now.
So Frank, I have a comment for you on that. And is that kind of might kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Take building 6 and rotate it 90 degrees and take building 4 and turn it into a duplex. And that way you get rid of 2 units and you create sort of like, you get some separation between the northern property line and the buildings. And building 1, which is on a city street, I would say is more inclined to be closer to the property line anyway for a future project. and you could create some natural landscape buffer in that sort of areas, and you'd go down to 18, not 16. Meet the ordinance and sort of get that buffer landscape area. And you could do it quite easily with building 4 by just almost cutting off and having the interior, you know, stair circulation be exposed rather than be between the 2 units or 4 units.
Yeah.
It sounds like the you know, the 19, you know, going from 19 to 20 units on a private road isn't something that the board has flexibility to allow. That's not a waiverable item, correct, Marla? I believe that's a maybe we can waive that and have 19 units. But I think there's, you know, what we would come back in final is if that can't be waived, we would just come back with less units.
I would want the board to have a robust discussion of whether they believe that is a waivable criteria or not. There have been conflicting opinions.
Thank you. Mark, your point is really well taken, and we're interested in it. It really hurt to think that we don't want to lose 4 units, and we really don't want to lose 1 unit because the entire cost of the project and the infrastructure is going to be expensive. And you know, the intention behind these units is to really provide this sort of workforce housing resource. So if we can avoid losing units, that would be our primary goal. But so we would like to ask the board to consider that question as to whether 20 could be allowed. And this is something that I don't know what the rationale was for the ordinance in the first place, but whether the board can do this or whether this is something that the Planning Commission would still have an opportunity to consider as part of the changes that it's making. But it just seems like it's an arbitrary number, and it would be really great to maintain the consistency of the way we're building these buildings with the interior stairways.
Well, you don't want to go down the road of changing the regulations, right? Because you're vested and you made an extra special effort to be vested.
Oh, absolutely. We don't want to propose that, Marla, but if this is a citywide issue and the city has an opportunity to consider it, we'd certainly, you know, I'd like to see it be thought of.
There's a lot of history, some of which I am familiar with, some of which I am not, and I am not feeling super prepared to present that history, but I do agree with you, Frank, that it's important for the board to understand as they discuss whether they believe this to be a waivable criteria or not. So given this discussion and some of the other discussions about the building aesthetics and the commercial nature of the building, at this point, I am leaning, and that, you know, we can continue having discussions. I think there's 12 or so staff comments. I'm leaning towards a continuation with enough time for the applicant and the board to do some work before we talk again. Because I think this project would be really well served by having some of these issues sorted out before a decision is issued, rather than kicking the can down the final plat. But that's my 2 cents on this, and you know, let's carry on through comments 9 and forward if the board doesn't have anything else to say about 19 units on private road.
I think the issue really comes down to whether or not we have the authority to waive it. Because if we have the authority to waive it, I would support a waiver because I do think that the project, you know, is well laid out. If we don't, I think the solution, that I sort of posited does offer the ability to provide that nice landscaping that, you know, we were possibly saying might be needed. So, I mean, how do we find out, Marla, whether we have the authority or not? Normally, you guys tell us, yes, you have the authority to waive that. It's one of those waivable regulations.
Yeah, this is somewhat of a gray area.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't feel totally prepared to enter into that. I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was going to come up.
But it would definitely need to be more consideration by the board with more information provided.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that we should get through the staff comments, but I do think we're going to be going to a continuance. And I think, Frank, you should want us to do a continuance because I think these are some issues that you definitely want to resolve for us, to be able to move this project forward.
Sure. Thank you. We agree, Mark. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Moving on to staff comment number 9, bottom of page 12. This is regarding traffic issues. Staff recommends the board determine whether to ask the applicant to quantify the existing level of service of adjoining signalized intersections to determine if this project may have difficulty meeting the required level of service. Applicant, you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I do. So, per ITE, this project generates 25 PM peak hour trips. It's 18 in, 16 in, 9 exiting during the PM peak hour. And I think distributed between north and south, you're going to see a pretty negligible impact on either of the intersections to the north or the south there. I think to the south, you have the Spear Swift signal. And then to the north, you're up at the jug handle on Williston Road. And I just don't see that, small increase having any impact on those busy intersections. So we didn't, which is why we didn't provide much in the way of additional traffic analysis.
And I'd like to add that even though this is I'm not a traffic expert by any means, but I would like to remind the board how the concept for this project is that people who live here would be able to easily walk or bike to employment centers that are really close by, and the University of Vermont being an obvious place and the Medical Center Hospital are both connected to the project almost directly with the bike path that's across the street on the west side of Spear Street. So we really hope and expect that a lot of our tenants would choose to walk or bike to places where they might be going. We think that's a realistic expectation.
Okay, board members? Stephanie, you got any comments on this?
Thanks for putting me on the spot here.
Well,
No, I mean, I think it's one of those things where I relate it back to stormwater just because that's, where I spend more of my time, but it's the incremental increases over time that people don't always consider or think about as a whole. And so, yeah, this project only generates 25, new PM peak hour trips. So that doesn't raise too much alarm considering where it's located and it having a significant impact. But over time, you get enough developments that have 25, 25, 25, it does end up having more impacts. But I mean, offhand, I don't feel like it is significant.
I'll weigh in this. Yeah, given its location, and this is great infill, it's where we want development to be. It's not a bunch of $600,000 duplexes. This is the workforce housing we need. That adding additional billable hours for Frank's team just would seem to be not appropriate and not really necessary based upon the facts too. So, and hopefully someday we'll have bus service on Spear. Any other board members on this one?
No, I'm kind of falling in that line as well.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, thanks. Staff comment number 10, top of page 13. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to work with the Director of Public Works to determine the appropriate location for the repeating rapid flashing beacon and discuss whether to require this prior to closing preliminary plat or as a condition of final plat approval. Frank, Abby?
This is something that we will and can and will show on the plan. We have shown the crosswalk across Spear Street next to the new city street. And the RFB sign or the beacon will be on the pedestrian crossing sign in advance in the north and south direction of Spear Street. And we're happy to work with DPW on final placement prior to final.
Thanks, Marla. Any follow-up?
The question here is not whether they do it, but whether you care if they do it before final, if they do it before closing preliminary or not. If nobody feels strongly that they need to see it now, then we're fine with it at final.
I'm fine with it at final. Board members?
I'm fine with it at final.
Fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving along. Getting close. Page 14, staff comment 11 regarding wetland impacts. Applicant testimony on page 13 over to 14. 11, staff considers this criterion met and recommends the board discuss whether they have any concerns with the proposed wetland impacts. Board members?
As I read it, they're talking about nominal to class 3 wetland and no impact to class 2 wetlands. Is that the case?
We do have a minor impact currently shown with the stormwater system into the class 2 50-foot wetland buffer at the northwest corner of the site. As we discussed previously, we are going to be re-looking at that stormwater treatment, but potentially we will continue to have buffer impacts to the class 2 wetland, the northwest corner. Might be easier to pull up the overall plan just off of
Marla, this would still be consistent with any proposed changes of the LDRs? No, wouldn't be inconsistent with it?
I'm going to not answer your question, and then I'm going to answer your question.
Okay.
This application is subject to the current LDRs now and forevermore unless they miss one of their deadlines. So it doesn't matter.
Okay.
To answer your question, under the future regulations currently proposed, which are not yet final, there will not be class 3 wetland buffers. No impacts, very, very limited class 3 wetland impacts will be allowed. Class 2 buffers will be enlarged, so their proposed class 2 buffer impact will be enlarged.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, did you want to make a point there on?
Yeah, it's still hard to see on that plan. On the smaller, the top overall plan, it does show just there's some subsurface storage going past the edge of pavement there, which would be partially within the buffer again.
You're treating stormwater, I'm cool with it. So board members?
I'm fine with it.
Fine.
Move along, page 15. Other, bike parking and storage. Staff recommend number 12. Staff recommends the board discuss whether to require the applicant to locate one inverted U-type rack for each building. Staff reminds the board there are 4 units per building.
Right. We will be providing bike parking for each building undercover in that central area, and there will be we're making provisions for 8 bikes per building, including electric outlets for e-bikes.
Oh.
So we will meet every the requirement inside each building. Will exceed that requirement.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks. Marla, go ahead.
Subtlety, sorry, this is just what the regulations say. I think, Frank, what you're proposing is admirable and fully support it. There's a difference in our regulations between long-term bicycle storage and short-term bicycle storage. So I don't know, Delilah, maybe you know this off the top of your head. If they're exceeding the long-term bike storage and it's in a space accessible to people, guests, whatever, could they count it towards their required short-term bicycle storage?
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, so I guess the distinction is just that there's a short-term requirement and a long-term requirement, and the short-term requirement is super easy. You may need to throw in some racks. And it sounds like you are going above and beyond on the long term. Given this conversation, I would suggest that, you know, if you're gonna need to put one U per building, we'll find a place for it. And it's gonna cost you $100 per U. So.
Sure. That's totally okay with us.
This is a T crossing and I dotting question, really, at this point.
Thanks. Board members, staff comment number 12?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to 13. The regulations do not contemplate a centralized bike storage area for such a widely distributed development. The furthest unit is located approximately 500 feet from the location proposed for bicycle storage. Staff recommends the board discuss whether this is acceptable.
So,
Didn't we just discuss this?
pardon me?
Did.
Well,
Didn't we just,
no, that was the short-term parking.
okay.
Right, so Frank kind of addressed this already.
Yeah, I think we have, we'll provide enough long-term and short-term storage inside each building to meet the needs, we hope, for each building. There will be an amenity offered inside the steel building, which would be a workshop area where residents could go and use that space to work on bicycles, but it wasn't planned for it to be specifically bike storage. We do think that some of the steel building could be used, and that's one of the things that we'll program with Marla to provide storage facilities for the units. And if someone wants to put their bike in there, that's fine, but the actual bike storage would be inside each building.
Great. Board members, any other follow-up for that?
No.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Hallelujah.
Okay. Any members of the public here? Well, I just can't see because I'm only showing active cameras. Everyone.
Certainly should ask if there's any public comment.
Are there any public comments? Okay. Seeing anybody there? All right. Sounds like a continuance was in order based upon the discussion. So somebody want to make a motion or another motion?
So I'm going to recommend continuing to September 8th because our annual recess is the second meeting in August. So that's soonest available.
And are there specific items that we are continuing for? Will those be outlined so that we can address them and not
The
go?
minutes will be posted, and if you wanted to rewatch the recording, and then there's some things that we have noted that we should be coordinating on. And so I guess just to be clear, we need everything 2 weeks before the continued hearing, but you and I should be working together long before that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I move that preliminary plat application SD 2019 of 600 Spear Street be continued to September, did you say 8th, Marla? September 8th.
Yeah. Yep. That's the weird one. Oh, sorry. I'll discuss later, but I'll tell you about, remind me.
And the application number is SD 2119.
19.
I believe, yeah.
Second to the motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to continue, say aye.
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 Any opposition? And any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. It's 10:20. Do we have a set of minutes? I can't remember where we're at. I don't have the agenda in front of me.
Yep.
We do, and I move adoption of the minutes.
I have one comment.
Yeah, please. This one was tough.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Then my comment was a typo. everything else I read was fine. Was there anything specific you wanted us to look at or
Long
comment
drive.
on?
Long drive.
Looks good to me.
And Frank and team, thanks very much.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you all. We appreciate the long hours tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Want me to share the minutes? Or will you share?
So I'll go again. I move adoption of the minutes.
My one
What
minor
page?
comment, page 1, the bottom, the last sentence. Members agree to hold the next 2 meetings virtually, then being in-person meetings at the new City Hall location. I assume you meant then begin in-person meetings at the new City Hall location.
Yes. Those are the ones that spell check doesn't catch.
I know, because it could have been either, especially being in person. Yeah. I thought that long drive, and I specifically read it for the dog park as well, especially after our discussions, and I thought both of them were captured pretty clearly.
Okay.
What's the date on these?
June 15th.
15 June.
Thanks.
Okay, so Dawn has moved to approve, presumably as corrected by Mark.
Yes.
A second.
All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes as drafted and corrected, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries.
Dan,
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this tonight.
Oh, sure. Been a secret desire of mine for many years.
You will have your chance, believe me.
So
Crossed it off your bucket list, Dan?
other business, focus, thank you.
Is there anything we needed to discuss or deliberate after, or are we done?
Can I say my other business, please?
Now that our brain is mush.
Oh.
So September 8th will be the Development Review Board. It will also be City Council. We will be in the new space. Jesse and I will work together to determine who gets the big room, depending on who has the more interesting agenda. And the reason we are choosing to conflict is because Monday is Labor Day, Tuesday is when we're having our meeting, and Wednesday is Rosh Hashanah. So it's just a big old messy confluence.
Okay.
So sorry, you can't go to City Council that week. Okay, that was all my other business. Thank you.
Any other items?
Nope.
So we'll see you in person on August 3rd.
See you
In
guys.
person.
You bet.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Somebody? All right, good night. We're
Good night, guys.
adjourned.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Marla.
everybody.
Thank you,
This
Marla.
conference is no longer being recorded.